This conference will now be recorded.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? If none, would the clerk please call roll?
Stites. Let me make sure he's not muted. We seem to be having some issues with the mute function. Also, Councilmember Cahar seems to be having some issues with her speaker function. So trying to get those addressed right now. I can't seem to get.
They could do it by the chat, or if their camera is on, they could just do a thumbs up. If that works.
Yeah, I don't see. I think somebody just called in. That might be Councilmember Cahar. Let me see if I can get that person unmuted.
Hi, Zach, can you hear me?
Yep, that's Councilmember Cahar.
I can see the screen, I just can't hear it. I'm listening through my phone.
Okay, perfect. I'm trying to get Councilmember Stites to be able to unmute. He might need to call in as well. One second, everyone. I'm going to put myself on mute. Councilmember Stites is calling me now. Councilmember Stites is going to try and call in as well. Let's see. Real quick before we go on with the meeting, just let me do a quick sound check on everybody. I know I've got Councilmember Shriver and I know I've got Councilmember Cahar. Councilmember Malak, can you hear us and can we hear you?
That's affirmative.
Perfect.
I neglected to make the announcement that Councilmember Adams will not be able to be with us tonight.
Thank you, sir. So right now we're just sitting tight until Councilmember Stites is pulling the number and he's going to call in. He can see what we're doing, but for some reason his tablet's giving him some issues. We'll give him just a minute or two while he pulls that number.
And Zach, while we're waiting, I think we also have Lisa is on as well, I believe. So Lisa Dion.
Yeah, I saw her pop up. Now we do have everybody on except for, well, somebody just called in. Councilmember Stites, is that you?
Austin Kirby just called in for Anchor
Okay.
Construction.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I see a caller tone, but it's muted. Now we have 11.
Tell you what, let me I'm gonna just, while he's getting the phone figured out, I'm gonna text Councilmember Stites to see if he approves the minutes. And while he's doing that, I'll do the roll call vote. Councilmember Kahar,
Yes.
Councilmember Malat,
Yes.
Councilmember Shriver,
Yes.
and I just got a text from Councilmember Stites in the affirmative to approve those minutes. So motion passes.
Okay, motion has carried. All right, and the next item on the agenda will be a statement of the bills paid in the amount of $1,315,413.66.
Real quick, sir, it's actually $1,351,413. The 5 and the 1 were misplaced on the agenda.
Very good, thank you.
And Mayor, I would just note, I mean, a large portion of that is bond payments, our annual bond payments. So those only hit twice a year. The second one of each year includes both principal and interest. So that's what you're seeing there,
All right, thank you, Mike.
large portion.
Okay, so we
Mr.
need,
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the statement of bills in the amount of $1,351,413.66.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call roll?
Councilmember Stites just texted me. Yes, he approved the bills. Councilmember Kahar,
Yes.
Councilmember Malat,
Yes.
and Councilmember Shriver.
Yes.
Okay, the next item on the agenda will request for comments from the public.
Mr. Mayor, we had 2 comments submitted for tonight's meeting. I'll just read them as presented. One from Dan Saran at South 110th Street regarding Chip and Seal Road subdivision, specifically on South 110th Street. I live on South 110th Street between the 700 and 900 block of South 110th Street, south of Kansas Avenue. Our street is crumbling away from zero chip and seal operations for approximately 10 years. We now have holes in the middle of the street, bubbled up areas along the edges, and water main failures happening that BPU has been repairing as of last week. I have lived in Edtown since 1985 and have not seen a chip and seal streets in such disrepair. I understand the cost of $15,000 per single lane road mile. Our question, when will you budget or schedule the regrading and chip and seal operations a lifetime of 5 years for our older chip and seal subdivisions? They are now in dangerous shape. I look forward to your reply to our questions. I look forward to seeing it budgeted for 2021. Our property taxes are approaching $4,000 per year with no sewers, poor street lighting, and a crumbling, unsafe road. Citizens do not understand your roadwork priorities or budget, with the city moving forward on 110th at Speaker Road and the roundabout, while letting our daily use subdivision roads fall into dangerous disrepair. I have communicated some information to Mr. Saran just about the road review and rating projects, how that's going to help us prioritize those projects in the future. Next comment is from Mr. Bruce Hollenbeck at 9664 Crestwood Drive. Mr. Hollenbeck lives at the corner of Crestwood Drive and the portion of Steel Road, which was near the corner of Crestwood Drive and the portion of Steel Road, which was recently closed. Mr. Hollenbeck called to complain about the road closure, stating he uses that portion of Steel Road to access his property with his truck. He does not have a drive that accesses that portion of Steel Road, but what he's saying is he drives a 1-ton dually with a 15-foot flatbed and a 25-foot trailer. He drives up the now closed portion of Steel Road past Crestwood and then backs into his drive. He can't do this with this section of Steel Road closed, and he would like the road reopened. And those are all the comments, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. Before we move into the next item on the agenda, Mike has an announcement to make about our new planner.
Yes, good evening, everybody. As you know, Dave, though he is online with us tonight, Dave Knoppik, left us to take a full-time position in another area city. And so through that process, we felt our best option was to go ahead and bring in a full-time planner, which we have done. His name is Bradley Kovar. If he can raise his hand, there he goes, shakes his hand. Bradley comes to us. He's a graduate of UMKC School of Planning, which I'll mention Dave was an adjunct professor there. So Dave is aware of the quality of their program, and spent about the last year doing an internship with the city of North Kansas City. So we're happy to have him on board. North Kansas City has some similar types of issues that we have. I mean, difference in some ways, but similar in other ways. So we're glad to have Bradley on board. Obviously, he brings a lot with him, but he still has some skills to learn. It would be hard to replace a Dave Knopik in any environment. So we're happy to have him on board. He actually started today, and we're putting him to work immediately. So he's here this evening to be part of our council meeting and to observe the presentation of the Planning Commission items. So if you're by City Hall, get a chance to stop by, say hello, please do so. And he will be back in the same office that David occupied previously. So thanks for the time, Mayor. And we can
Mike,
go.
thank you. And Bradley, welcome to the meeting and welcome to the Edwardsville City. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda will be consider cereal malt beverage license application renewals.
Yes, sir. What we have before the agenda, before the council, I should say, is our standard action at this time of year, renewing the cereal malt beverage applications for 2021. As usual, we have 4 applicants that come in for the CMB license. Those are Jacksonville C-Store, the former Jackson service station, still the service station, but it's also the BP station on South College Drive, MS Petroleum, Roscoe's Barbecue, and the On the Go at the corner of Wood End and over near the industrial park. These have been submitted to public safety for their review, and they have no issues with approving the CMV licenses for 2021.
Thank you. Well, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the cereal malt beverage applications.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the 4 applications for cereal malt beverage licenses.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or discussions from the city council? Starting with Kay Har.
I had one
No
question that
comments.
was already answered by Mike Webb. I had texted him.
Okay.
I had asked him about the change of the low-powered beer to the high-powered beer, and he said that everything was good on that. So the motion will stand for that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shriver, any comments?
No.
Okay, Councilmember Stites, any comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
Kahar, Malat,
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda will be conduct a public hearing to consider amending funding year 2020 budget and take any necessary action subject to that hearing.
So Mayor, I think what we'll do is I'm going to let start and let Zach kind of give an overview of the proposed budget amendments. We then will need to call a public hearing. If there's anybody online that wishes to speak on the topic, you can allow them to do that. We can unmute them. and close the public hearing, and then the action would be to consider approval of the amended budget as shown on the certificate that's included in your packet. So with that, I will turn it over to Zach to give an overview.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Again, this is a standard item that we usually handle this time of the year to amend the fiscal year budget. This was noticed in the paper for a public hearing on this date. The two funds that we are requesting amending before the year closes out is the solid waste fund and the technology fund. As it's detailed in your agenda memo, the reasons for the request for the solid waste fund was because at the time of the publication that needed to be done in order to hold this public hearing at this time, we were still going back and forth with waste management, trying to determine what the final cost of the bulky item pickup was due to the kind of elongated nature of it. What we ended up on is actually just an all-in tonnage cost, which is just about a little over $1,700, $1,716.25 to be exact, which is about half of what the normal citywide cleanup is. So technically speaking, we don't expect to spend the fund balance or spend out of the solid waste fund an additional amount. But I would still keep that authorization in there in case we wanted to get creative between now and the end of the month with some other program that we could offer before waste management turns it over to KC disposal. So we're really expecting that fund to come in pretty much on point as far as the budget is concerned. We just needed to have a number in there so it would be ready for this public hearing. For the technology fund, we're requesting that it's increased $6,000. The two primary reasons for that are the citywide server upgrades that we were trying to determine where exactly those were going to fall in the technology fund or the general fund or maybe some combination of CARES Act fund. Those upgrades were going to be needed for those kind of activities. And then you might remember in early September, we had a lightning strike at the facility, which caused all kinds of fund damage for the police chief / IT director to track down and fix. So we had some costs associated with that. Neither of these amendments are going to require any additional taxes or fees to pay for, and they're offset with the amount of revenue that's currently in the projected for those two funds. So pretty standard boilerplate items as far as those two are concerned. So if there are, like what the city manager just said, we'll need a motion to open the public hearing, take some comments, and then a motion to close the public hearing, at which point we'll have the vote. So my recommendation is if there are questions or comments from the council portion, then maybe we should do that at this point before opening up to public hearing.
Okay, very good. So we will do the council comments before we open up to the public hearing. So do you want me to roll call the council members or just allow them to speak? Okay, call roll call. Councilmember Cahar, do you have any comments?
Zach, I was wondering if you could explain again the solid waste increase. I feel like you said it might be just under $2,000 that could go up, but I believe the request is to raise it even higher than that. Could you explain the reasoning behind that?
Yes. So in order to, at the time that we needed to publish the notice for this public hearing to amend the budget, we weren't exactly sure what the final cost was going to be for the bulky item pickup that took place in early November. Now, if you remember when we had first discussed it, the model that we were using was going to put that cost pretty much in line with what the citywide cleanup usually costs, which is anywhere between $2,700 to close to $4,000, depending on the amount of containers we brought in. But because that event stretched out so long, we weren't exactly sure how it was going to get billed. Now, and we ended up working it out with waste management, noting that we really only needed, because we were going to convert to charging us by the ton, we ended up collecting 13.73 tons of material on that bulky item day. And so we're just going to be charged per ton rather than the hourly rate or any kind of recovery calls or anything like that, which is appropriate because it was not really, through anything that we could control that event stretched out for, the 5 or 6 days that it stretched out beyond that initial day. But we included that kind of all-in amount because we needed to have a number in there to publish for this public hearing, and leaving it in, leaving that budget authority, that doesn't mean that we're going to spend that amount, that additional $8,794. I don't see any reason why we would, but it does give us that cushion in case between now and the end of the year, we decide we want to do something additional out of that fund. It gives us that ability to do that. Again, I don't expect us to do that. And even if we had a more solid plan to move forward, then the fund balance in there would support that. But again, I think that fund is going to come in pretty much right on budget, if not a little bit less, because of the actual less costs associated with the bulky item pickup as compared to the citywide cleanup. But at the time that we published this budget, or excuse me, published the amendments, that was not clear. So we kind of put in the total amount that could have been charged.
If I may.
Would it be appropriate then to just reduce it from the 8,700 to like 2,000?
Let me say two things. So the quick answer to your question is yes. So you can't increase it above that amount, but you could reduce it. So the two things that this helps us to avoid is there's two things in Kansas law. There's the Kansas cash law, which basically says if you don't have the funds on hand, you can't spend them, right? So you have to have the money in the accounts to spend in any account. The second one, which is really what this one relates to, is the budget law, which says you cannot expend more than what you budgeted on an annual basis, even if you have the revenues to support it. So you could bring in a lot of revenue, but if you didn't budget for something and then you go over that budgeted amount, whether it's the original budget or the amended budget, then that gets noted into your audit as a state budget violation. So we typically want to make sure we have a little bit of gap in there to ensure that we don't get into a situation where we would, push that number. I don't personally see us expending any funds on any new projects within the solid waste fund. It is a self-supporting fund, so besides its budget, it has to be supported by its own revenue. So it is not a tax-funded fund at all. So it doesn't receive tax dollars to support this fund. Yeah, that may help a little bit. So whether you adjust or not, it's really about ensuring we don't get into a violation with the budget law when we do the audit.
And on that note, to kind of answer your other question, Councilmember, like Mike said, you can certainly authorize expenditure less than that 215,000. I would be probably most comfortable with no less than a 210,000. That's only because we do have some expenses related to tied into getting the word out about the switch over. So notices that are going to be included in the utility billing, just the cost of utility billing and postage associated with that. So to Mike's point, it gives us that little bit of cushion and breathing room to avoid a potential budget violation.
As I see it, it's not anticipated that any expenditure is going to be made, but I certainly don't think we need to lower it back. It's money that's in that account anyway, so it's not going to be spent unless it absolutely has to. So there's no real benefit of reducing that amount back to another number. So with that, Councilman MALT, any comments?
I have no comments. I was ready to open a public hearing if
Okay, we're not ready. We have to go through the rest of the council.
you're
Thank
ready
you.
for that.
Okay. Councilmember Shriver, any comments?
No comments.
Okay. Councilmember Stites, any comments?
No.
Okay. Now I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to open a public hearing to consider amending the FY20 budget.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments? Councilman Harry Har. Okay, Shriver or Malat? No. Okay, Shriver, any further comments?
No. No.
Okay, Councilmember Stites, any further comments?
No.
Okay, so would the clerk please call roll to open up the public hearing?
Stites,
Yes.
Ahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Driver.
Yes.
Okay, at this point, the public hearing is open, so any of those people attending the meeting from the public are, you may make any comments or questions if you'd like.
Zach, how will an individual note if they wish to speak?
If they're working on their browser and if they can find the chat function, probably the easiest thing to do is just to send me a note in that chat function that they would like to speak. If they're on the phone, that would make it a little bit more difficult, and I can unmute everyone and then see what the call or what the try and manage it that way. It's a little messy, but it might be the easiest way to do it for the folks who are calling, because we do have a couple of calling guests at this point.
Can you go to each of the call-in callers just one at a time and unmute them and then ask them if they wish to speak?
I will see if I can do that, yes. Sometimes with the call-in function, the admin facilities are a little bit different. I've got caller 3 unmuted. Do you have a comment to make?
No comment.
Thank you. I've got caller 5 unmuted. Do you have a comment to make? I've got caller 14 muted, or excuse me, unmuted. Do you have a comment to make? And let's see. I have got someone identified as owner who is unmuted. Do you have a comment to make?
It's the mayor.
Oh,
That's
is that the mayor? Gotcha.
Yeah, I have not been able to change that title, so
I will remember that.
thank you.
And Mr. Schlupp, I see that you're online. You are on your browser. Do you have a comment to make, sir?
Okay, it appears no one has.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe we've got any other callers on, so it would appear we have no comments.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
Kahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Driver.
Yes.
And just to recall, Mayor, when you get to the motion on amending the budget, you also have an original vote on this item.
Okay, I do. All right, very good. Okay, would the mayor, the chair would now entertain a motion to approve the amended budget.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the amended fiscal year 2020 budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the amended funding year 2020 budget. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor, before we go on, just to verify, we are amending per what was presented by staff.
That's correct. Yeah, I think everybody understands that. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stites,
Yes.
Kahar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
and Schreiber.
Yes.
Thank you all. Okay, the next item on the agenda would be consider ordinance number 1035, amending Appendix A fee schedule of the Edwardsville Code of Ordinances.
Real quick, Mayor, I do need to get your vote on that budget
Oh,
amendment.
yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you, sir. And on the amending Appendix A fee schedule, similar to the other two items, this item comes up at this time of the year. This amends the fee schedule, the master fee schedule included in the Code of Ordinances that details the fees and charges associated with city services. Typically, those include utility bill payments, and every once in a while they can include, community center payments, special events payments, licenses, things like that. This year, we've got two changes to the fee schedule. One being the solid waste charges. The adopted 2021 budget assumed that solid waste charge to customers would go up no more than 3.5%. As you remember, we went through a bidding and solicitation process for a new service provider that would begin January of 2021. Through that process, we were able to select local partner Casey Disposal as our new solid waste service provider. Through that and through some number crunching and briefly considering the inclusion of the mobile home park in the citywide contract before they decided they did not want to be a part of that contract and continue having their own agreement with Waste Management. The new charges were put together, and that's what we're presenting to you tonight. Happy to report that it represents less than a 1% increase from $18.12 per month to $18.25 per month. Really, that translates only to about $1,800, between $1,700 and $1,800 of additional revenue per year. But to Mike's earlier point about the solid waste fund, we typically budget that one very pretty tight because there's not really a big need to have a large fund balance in that because it's a utility fund and we don't really maintain any of the equipment associated with that contracted out. So that $1,700 doesn't really sound like a lot, but it does give us, that little bit of a cushion, and it does represent less than a 1% increase, really only $1.56 total increase per resident per year. So we try to keep that very tight. Also, from a logistical point of view, it's easier to make change from 1825 than it is to 1812 when folks come in and pay with paper money when they come into City Hall to pay. The cemetery charges, so to catch this group up to some of the conversations going on at the Cemetery, Parks, and Public Spaces Board, and even prior to that on the Cemetery Board, how our processes at the cemetery have worked for the last number of years is that a funeral service, when that is scheduled, the family will contact a funeral service and schedule a funeral to take place at the cemetery. And the funeral service has been contracting with the local diggers and the local excavators. And those charges are essentially passed through. The opening and closing charges were passed through from the diggers through the funeral services to that family. Traditionally, in other communities who have more robust public works staff, that a lot of that activity, that opening and closing is handled in-house because our public works staff isn't really set up to where we have that much staff to do that. Our solution to this would be that the city now acts as the pass-through for those costs. And the reason that's beneficial is, if you remember some of the conversations we had about the cemetery, some of those had to do with graves sinking in, needing leveling, needing backfilled, those kind of things. It's really that kind of short-term maintenance after a new plot and a new funeral is held. So by having a contracted agreement through the city rather than the individual funeral homes who may use different diggers, we've got a little bit tighter control on that, and we'll be able to know who the digger is who's coming and doing the work. We're confident in the work that they do, and we'll be able to set up essentially, if a funeral is scheduled for the third week of January, there's an expectation between the city and its contractor over the next, I think it's 60 to 90 days, where they're essentially available to be scheduled on call to come in and perform that backfilling and that leveling, things like that. So that way, whenever the grave is done leveling, city staff can take over at that point and handle the reseeding, the overseeding, and getting vegetation established there. The CPPS board solicited some quotes from area diggers, and K&A Digging from Oskaloosa emerged as the lowest and best cost. K&A Digging, just to give you some background, probably about, if I were to assign a number to it, it'd be between 90 and 95% of the funeral services that take place inside of our cemetery have already been done by K&A Digging, so they're familiar with the site. They, we're in regular contact anyway on a number of different issues, so this really just kind of formalizes that relationship between the city and K&A Digging. The costs that are included for the opening and the closing for both standard graves and cremated remains, those represent actually the cost to the city. So we will get charged by K&A Digging to perform these services, and then an additional 15% service charge, which will help cover the costs for those return visits whenever they need to do leveling and backfilling and things like that. So this has been reviewed and recommended for approval by the CPPS board and is now included in this fee schedule ordinance. If you've got any questions to that effect, I am available to answer those.
There appear to be none. So now the chair would entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 1035, amending fee funding year 2020, 1035, I'm sorry, amending appendix fee schedule.
Mayor, just before you go on, do you want to ask each council member if they have a comment, or just?
I would rather do that after the motion is made. That's generally the way it's done.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Always after a motion has been made and seconded.
I move to approve ordinance number 1035, amending Appendix A fee schedule of the Edwardsville Code of Ordinances.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councilmember Cahar, do you have any further comments or questions?
The only question I had is if they do come back out to this site, does the city cover the cost or does the family cover that cost?
So the city will cover that cost through these fees. So there won't be additional, if there needed to be a backfilling done on a grave, we don't go back to the family to recoup that cost. The costs for those are included in the standard, the opening and closing costs in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember MALT, any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shriver, any comments or questions?
No, I have none.
Councilmember Stites, any comments or questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. So there has been a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites?
Yes.
Cahar?
Yes.
MALT?
Yes.
Driver?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda will be consider recommending the approval from the Planning Commission regarding requests for extension related to revised final plan for a trailer parking storage area at 9911 Wood End, FASTENAL.
So Mayor, just briefly, we do have Mr. Nopick with us tonight. We were able to pull him away from his busy schedule, his former retirement, to be with us tonight. We do have a number of items under planning, and I will say the next item is far more complicated than the first one. And with that wonderful introduction, I will turn it over to Mr. Nopick to give us all the information we need.
Oh, boy.
You continue.
Thank you to the city manager for that introduction. I really appreciate it.
Dave Knopick, planning consultant for the city of Edwardsville. As Mr. Webb has indicated, we do have 2 items here. The first one, item number 7, is, as noted, the extension request for trailer parking and staging area at 9911 Wood End Road. This is the FASTENAL property. And Zach, if you want to, there you go. You might recall about a year ago on December 9th of 2019, the governing body approved the final plan for approximately 54 acres of land at this location. As part of that request, it was asked to allow for gravel trailer parking or staging area on the property, and that is located what would be in your lower left hand or right hand corner, I'm sorry, behind the pink shaded area. That, if you'll recall, the pink shaded area is the automated distribution warehouse facility that FASTENAL is currently operated, with plans for expansion in 2 more phases. The shading that is yellow, green, and blue is the current warehouse facility and distribution center for FASTENAL, with those phases marked, and future phases for expansion also noted off to the west, or what would be to the left-hand side of the slide there. As part of that initial request, we did have some stipulations and conditions in allowing the gravel area. They are essentially the same stipulations that we would be holding to if you choose to extend this another 12 months. It was noted that when you approved that final plan, the idea was that FASTENAL would be coming back within a year with a plan in how they were going to upgrade the gravel area for use for trailer parking and things like that. In your packet is a letter from the applicant. I'm not sure if the applicant is on with us tonight, but there is a letter in there explaining that due to the COVID situation and other things, there has not been as much movement on the expansion plans or on the facility improvement plans for the area. They have continued to work to build the trail segment that we were extending from Wood End Road along the western side of the property and down along the southern part of the property as part of completing their project to date. But this element of that final plan over the last 12 months has stagnated for a number of reasons there. So this item was heard by the Planning Commission on November 18th, and the Planning Commission recommended that the extension request be approved with the conditions that you see in your agenda memo. For the gravel area, again, this would have a length of time of another 12 months potentially of being in the gravel area, with the idea that maintenance plan for that area would be provided, which they have provided in the past, and I would assume would not change much since it's already established from that perspective. And then in regard to future paving, you can see outlined there that when they come back with their upgrade plans for the permanent hard surfacing and things like that, those would have to be submitted to the City Planning Commission as well as the Council for review and approval by December 13th of next year, 2021, with the idea that any paving work would be completed by April 15th of 2022. With that, I'm going to just stand ready for questions. And again, I'm not sure if the applicant's with us tonight or not.
Austin Kirby, representing the applicant. I am here to answer any questions. I don't know if I'm supposed to speak, but I just thought I'd say that. So I am here.
Thank you, sir. Okay, it appears as there are no other comments, so the chair would entertain a motion.
Well, so are we waiting before we make comments? Are we waiting for until there's a motion? Or?
That's correct. That's correct. We get the motion and comments are open. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, because I definitely have comments.
Sure. So do we have a motion and a second to approve, please?
Well, I guess it's kind of, Mayor, if I may, I think when you have the way that we're doing it here is if we're not able to comment prior to the motion, it might it could sway the way people make a motion or not make a motion to move forward. Not knowing what the question or the comments will be. I get that's just something I'll throw out there.
Okay, I understand, but I think I'm going to adhere to the Roberts rules that we have. So, and because I hate to break that open and start that kind of procedure that's quite often not necessary. But I understand and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Well,
With that,
go ahead. I think, go ahead, Mr. Malott.
okay, I was going to go ahead. I understand what Councilman Stites is talking about. I'll go ahead and adhere to the rules that have been established. I would make the motion to accept the approval of the Planning Commission regarding the request for the extension related to the revised final plan for a trailer parking storage area at 9911 Wood End Road. That's the FASTENAL company.
Okay, I'll second it, and then I have comments.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, so I'm going to.
Before we move on, let me just make sure, because I think a couple of things. One, we had talked about asking council for comments before motions. I think that's what
Right.
put out there. So I think that's some of the confusion. But I would note on, since this is a planning item, just so everybody is clear relative to voting, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong. So a motion, so the Planning Commission made a recommendation. To approve that recommendation takes a simple majority of the governing body, which includes the mayor. If it's to override the Planning Commission, it's basically a 2/3 vote of the governing body, and it's not governing body present, it's governing body. So effectively, to approve will take 3 votes, and to deny will take, I think I've got that wrong. Correct me on my numbers here, Dave. Is it 4 or 5, right?
It's
governing body, not governing body present.
Right. It would be, I believe it's still 4 of the entire governing body. This is one,
okay. Yeah.
Hang on just a second.
That's correct. It's 75. It's either simple majority, you're right, or 70. So it will take 4 members, 4 of the members here, regardless of the numbers. So it's 4 of 6 to either approve it or deny it, just so you know. So you have a motion for approval to accept the Planning Commission recommendation as we sit here now. I know there'd be comments. So just for clarity, it would take 4 votes to approve, or if it doesn't pass, then you can have another motion the opposite direction if that's what you choose to do. So I want to make sure we're clear on that.
If it's not approved, then it has to be rescinded back to the Planning Commission, but with directions. You just can't say send it back. You have to have a reason to send it back. Is that correct?
That's a third. Yeah, that's a third option, is to return it to the Planning Commission with a recommendation.
Okay.
So there's 3 possibilities.
Accept or deny or send it back. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And we can highlight the voting rules if that need be.
Okay. So now we're at a place
Is
where
there any space for the applicant to talk in all this, or not really?
Well, I think maybe first let's get the questions, Austin, before we from the council, so we know what the concerns are, and then if need be, I mean, it is not a public hearing, but if they wish to hear from the applicant, they can. But I think it'll be best to hear from the council first, please.
Okay. Councilman KR.
Sorry, I'm unmuting. The question I had is what the delay was caused by, and then why it would need another full 12 months instead of a shorter period of time.
I think what I'll do,
the best way is to, let's get these questions, and then we may, so we can answer them all concurrently. So
Very good.
Notes of the questions and then address them.
Good. All right. Councilman Malott, any questions?
I have no questions, but I could, Carolyn Cahar's, I didn't catch her, so it went on a pause.
Okay, she wanted to know why that that there is a delay. Could it be shortened up to a shorter time than the full years? I think, is that correct, Carolyn?
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, are there any comments or questions, Councilmember Malott?
Not from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shriver.
No comments.
Okay. Councilman Stice, it's your turn now.
Yes. Okay. So I guess if we were to go back a year from now or a year ago, and we were in this position and this was being presented to us, this was something that we would not typically do. And I remember specifically saying that I would support this, but I don't, and I remember the wording, but I don't want to see you guys back here in a year asking for it again. And here we are a year later, and it's being asked again, just like I had said 1 year ago, because I wouldn't have supported it a year ago if I'd known that we were going to be here a year later asking for another extension on something that we definitely don't do. Is allow. We went out to allow this to happen, being good partners and moving forward with all the development and things that are happening down there. To have gravel parking is not something that we do. And I know a lot of things have been on in the last year, and we could use COVID, we could use many things. But the fact of it is, we're here again asking for something that we don't typically do, and I was told back a year ago, no, we won't be doing that. We won't be asking in a year from now.
Mayor, would you like to hear from the applicant who
I think at this
can represent?
At this time, we'll allow him to make comments. Thank you.
So Austin, if you would like to address why this delay, and also I think the question is whether there would be a consideration to reduce the period of time from 12 months to something less.
Understood. Yeah, and I guess maybe I'll address Councilman Stites' comments, because I remember sitting there and nodding my head. And
hey, Austin,
agreeing.
So go ahead and do the formal name for us. Understood. And address so we have it for the record because it's being recorded.
Yes, Austin Kirby, Anchor Construction, 7121 Grape Road, Granger, Indiana, 46530.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead and make your responses.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to start by addressing Councilman Stites. I vividly remember that conversation as well, and I was sitting at the back of the council room nodding my head because we had no intention of coming back this year. However, if we look back to the reason that the request was made, it was for planning purposes. The area to the rear of the mini load, the desire was not to cement that with $500,000 worth of asphalt, and because that area was up in the air as to how that could be used. The way it came about that was used as much as it was is because they were storing a lot of inventory in trailers along that back parking lot, or in trailers, because they were still expanding their warehouse. The warehouse has now been expanded. They've moved all the inventory in there, and you can even see now that the number of trailers in that back parking lot only constitutes one row. So the purpose of wanting to leave that space a little bit mobile and in gravel yet was for future planning. And now we have had 8 months where planning for companies has been severely impacted. Future plans for buildings have been severely impacted. And as FASTENAL moves forward, they've had a number of developments and plans severely impacted by the events going on with the pandemic. And I know that COVID is not a fun excuse to hear anymore, but the reality is that it did impact plans. And that really is the only reason I feel somewhat genuine coming back here, because I don't think anybody could have seen this year coming the way it did. So that's the only reason I even feel comfortable coming back here to say, can we have another year? Because the reason we asked for a year in the first place was to have appropriate plans for that space. I know there was, you know, at one point talk of, you know, even subdividing that area to, you know, there's just different ideas that FASTENAL has had with that space depending on its needs. So I guess I understand the frustration in having this conversation again, but I submit that there have been significant impacts to planning, and that was the whole reason that this proposal came through in the first place. And I guess to address the initial couple questions from Councilwoman Kahar, I think I've kind of answered some of them. The big dynamic is that planning was impacted. If your request is that we change the timeline, we can look at doing that. The reason we asked for a year is because that's the language that was in the initial agreement, was the potential to ask for additional year. And it just, the timeline, we can look at a different timeline, but at this point, you know, 8 months of the year has been pretty significantly impacted with planning. So that's why we kind of figure, okay, if we could have another 12 months to look at this, it puts us on a similar timeline, and everybody kind of knows the dates instead of changing those. However, yeah, if that's something that the council would like to look at differently, we can look at a different timeline if that's desired. All right, and I'm open to any other questions.
So Austin, you say that you're open, because we really have, Mayor and Council, kind of two issues here. The first half of this issue is the submittal of a formal revised site plan. And the second issue then is if that formal site plan includes a parking area, which I guess it's possible it could or couldn't include this large of a parking area, then that parking area would have to be brought up to standards. So Austin, I think the question is, do you feel that you have a time frame to submit a revised final plan that takes into consideration your needs, and you know what our process is, that could be completed prior to December, which means generally you have to have submittal by October, you know, roughly October 1st. So you would have to be able to commit to an earlier time frame for a submittal of a final site plan. And I don't know if that's feasible or not, but I'm just following up on your comment about an altered date.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
I also have a comment.
Yeah, I guess to answer Mr. Webb's comment, our request would be to keep on the same timeline and have the site plan submitted by next October for what will happen if it's parking or something else. That gives the appropriate time for FASTENAL's planning wheels to go through. You know, they're a $5 billion company with, you know, intentions to grow and continue to grow, and they have been growing. Obviously, this year has been, like I said, impacted pretty significantly. They had projects, and they've had a number of different projects that were initially planning to move dirt this year that have gotten pushed off, and so there's been significant changes to their growth plan just to have to work around what's happened to the economy and to shutdowns, whatever it might be across the country. And so that's the situation there, and they've had to, they're having to adapt. And so our request would be to keep on the same timeline, okay, till next October, to have that time frame to figure out what this complex looks like moving forward.
This is Stites. I think it is a very slippery slope for us to set precedent for somebody to come back in after we had said we don't want to, not that we don't want to see y'all, but we don't want to have this request placed back in front of us in a year, and it was agreed upon. Yes, you won't. And here we are again. I just think that we're setting it up for anybody in the future to come in and say, well, what about this? What about? And if this was to go through, we have set precedent.
Mike, are we at okay, Carolyn, you've got a comment. Go ahead.
I just had a quick one. I was just thinking through, even if they get plans submitted in October, that doesn't seem like, and I don't know, I don't do the concrete work, but it doesn't seem like much time to actually get that ground improved and changed from October to December of next year. I don't know if that would be a reasonable timeline. That's why I was kind of wondering again, maybe if we do give an extension, do more of a 6 months, so that by next December, it's not, we're still figuring it out, but it's completed, done, and we're moved on. I don't know if that would be better, even just to send it back to planning, or what Council Member Stites thinks that solution might work out. I just think to next October might be pulling it a little bit too far.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify our understanding in terms of timeline, so October would be the deadline to submit plans for the improvements, and then plan commissions in November, city council would be in December again. That's when we would have approval to move forward and perform the work. And then the deadline for performing the work is the following April, as it was this year.
Yeah, I think that is your request, and that's what they have before them. You're correct, Austin. Is that so? You have plan submittal. We know that takes that roughly 60 to 75 days typically, and then following that, and they're saying they would commit to completing the actual work by that time. Now, I think it's also fair to say, and Austin can address this if he likes, this may or may not be the location that they have for any future trailer parking. So it could be at a different, there's not a lot of place on the site, but it's potential that they could have this at a different place on the site. It could be that they don't have any additional trailer parking on the site, so the existing parking that they have is sufficient. So it's whatever their site plan submittal would dictate the use of this area. So this area potentially could be used for, other buildings, parking, recreational areas. So I think it's important to understand through that site planning process that parking may or may not be at that location. I don't know if Dave has other comments related to the site plan process and Carolyn's comment about timing there.
No, I think you've recapped the timing as it would stand. It would take at least the 2 months to get through the process from the submittal to the time it would be before the governing body again.
And I think again, Austin, if you want to correct me, but part of their reasoning was that they were anticipating one of the future building phases, one or two of the building phases also coming on at the same time, and that then all the work can be done at the same time. So if say this remains a parking area, but they also expand either their warehouse or their other facilities out there, that the work can be coordinated into a single project. That's part of the reasoning that they discussed previously. Is that correct, Austin?
Yeah, that definitely would be a reasoning, a benefit to the process. Yes. Yeah, but I think maybe our biggest piece here is that we did not intend to come back here. That was not the plan. I nodded my head genuinely last time saying we wouldn't be back. However, I also had no idea that this year would be what it was. And so no intent to try to pull the shade over or take advantage. I get it. Yeah, the intent is just to deal with the situation as it has come, which has been significant planning impacts and future building plan impacts, as well as this space. So the request is to deal with that space with future plans and have it be better incorporated into future plans.
Thank you. So Dave, Mayor, I think, you do have the motion in the second. We've had comment, and I think it would be, and so the motion in the second is to accept the recommendation as presented. So we have that on there. But Dave, can you walk us through the voting options so everybody's on the same place if they're ready?
Let me flip the page so I make sure I get it right. Hang on just a second. I was looking at something else here, and so really there's 3 voting options that are available. One, the governing body supports the recommendation of the Planning Commission. If you do, which would be supporting of the motion, as I understand the motion, that would require a simple majority vote to approve that. The second option, obviously, is you could choose to remand the item back to the Planning Commission, which also would require just a simple majority vote to the effect of, also, as I think the mayor noted, you have to have that justification as to why you're sending it back to the Planning Commission. We would ask about that probably after you take a vote on this motion, if this motion were not to pass. The third option is that if you choose to take an action other than what the Planning Commission has recommended, then it's a 2/3 majority vote of the governing body is required. So that's, 4 of the 6 members of the governing body would be required to take any of those actions.
Thank you, Dave. I have remained quiet, but it is my opinion that there is, I do not have a big heartburn for approving the extension because I don't see that there are a whole lot of options to force this company to rethink or try to make a plan for something that they have no ability to do right now. So with that, I'm going to call the question and ask for the clerk to please call roll.
Before you do that, Zach, I just want to clarify. The motion is to support the Planning Commission recommendation of approval of the extension request with the conditions that were outlined in the memo for this item, correct?
Okay, yes.
And so, Dave, does that mean we don't have the option to shorten the timeline? That wasn't an option you gave us?
Under this option right now, this is going to be Robert's Rules of Order, so I'm going to look to Michael and a couple others here who may know better. If there was somebody that wanted to amend that motion to change the timeline, it would take the agreeance of the original motion provider and the one that has made a second to do that. The other option is to see where this goes, and if this motion fails, you could make another motion with the change in the timeline in it. Just remember that then that's a change to the Planning Commission recommendation. So that would be that four votes again would be needed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, you're exactly right on the procedure. Thank you. So Zach, would you please call roll?
Just to clarify, there's no recommendation to end the original motion. We're voting on the original motion as presented.
The original motion stands.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Stites?
Okay. Hang on. If the original motion stands, I withdraw my second.
I'm not sure that's quite kosher. I don't know that you can withdraw it after the motion. I think you need to vote and then proceed from there.
Mayor, I might suggest, I think Lisa is on. I don't know if she's on by telephone. Or Lisa, are you able to give us comment on whether you can withdraw the second? Do you see her on, Zach, or?
She's on. I know she's calling in. She usually does.
Yeah. Well, her L is still there, but the phone is white, is not green or red. So.
Right. So, Mayor, and I don't want to make it confusing here. So I just want to ask. So if this motion that is presented, which I second, and I don't want to withdraw it if there's another way to handle it. So if it would happen to not pass, if it's voted no, then someone could make another motion with maybe an amendment or a new motion. Is that correct? With maybe a shorter time.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to proceed with the roll call vote on the original motion then.
Please, go ahead.
Councilmember Stites?
I don't believe we heard you, Mr. Stites.
No.
Councilmember Kahar?
No.
Councilmember MALT?
Yes.
Councilmember Shriver?
No.
And then Mayor McTaggart?
Yes.
That's 3 noes to 2 yeses.
So Mayor, right? So
now at this point, someone could make a motion amending the timeline, if that's the direction of someone.
that motion clearly fails. It didn't get a.
Yeah, that's
Or-
correct. That's correct. So another motion has to be made. If I'm not correct, if I'm correct, Dave, is that correct? Another motion needs to be made then.
Yes.
And that motion could be something, and I'm going to just use the modification, or it could be a motion to deny. But what we have to get is a definitive answer on the recommendation. So that's the reason for a follow-up motion basically has to be made. So the motion to approve has failed. That doesn't necessarily mean that the recommendation is denied. So again, there can be a modified motion or a motion to deny at this point, or a motion to send it back to the Planning Commission if there's additional information that you would like.
Mike, if we're amending the timeline, should we say to have the final plans by a certain month to the Planning Commission?
I probably defer to Dave, but I think that yes. I mean, the request was basically to have the plans finalized by your December meeting in 2021. In order to do that, just by the time frame, that means they had to have a submittal by roughly October 1. for any, so let's just say it's if it's a month earlier, then it's going to hit your agenda in November. If it's 2 months early, it's going to hit your agenda in October. So you can just roughly think about if you want a final decision by your body, take 2 months prior to that, and that's when it has to be submitted by in order to meet, because it technically is a site plan, and site plans require public hearings, and therefore that requires us to do publications, just like a zoning case or any other public hearing case.
Right. I'm going to add to what Michael's talking about. So you actually have a couple dates there that are really triggered by, if we go to your agenda memo for this item, which was at page, looks like 17 of your packet. The first part is the utilization of the gravel area. That was intended to correspond with a governing body meeting date. I believe that would have been December 13th of 2021. If you were to move that 2 months forward to October, looks like it would be October 11th, if I'm not mistaken. That's right. It would be October 11th of 2021 would be that date. And so you would be basically limiting it to basically a 9.5 month process, but we would put the time certain in there. Then under item number 3, you would use the same date of October 11th, which would be your meeting on that in October 11th, 2021. We were allowing 4.5 months essentially after that to pave. If you're at that October timeline, I think you could do the same 4 months, but they're going to have a small construction window gap in there depending on weather. I mean, I think that's the one thing about an October timeframe. Once you get in November, December, it just depends on how cold it gets and what we're doing there. So, does that make sense?
And it does. That's why I was kind of thinking more along the lines of June, so they'd have the summer to work through their construction phase.
Okay. Let me
Because we haven't lost all of 2020, they had a good quarter to be planning. I'd like to be a good neighbor and work with them and try to do a modification, but I'm thinking more along the lines of having their plans in by June, whether it should be us with the planning committee, whatever is appropriate, but then they have the summer instead of approving something in October that's starting right before nasty weather hits for construction.
Right. So if you wanted to do, it really depends on if you want to use that July, it would be July 12th would be the city council date that you'd be looking at, but that would put it on the June Planning Commission on June 16th. And it would mean that their submittal basically has to be in around May 3rd to make that timeline work. Now with this kind of item, that timeline could be reduced a little bit, but we still have the public hearing aspect to this. So if we wanted a July city council or deadline date on this one for items 1 and 3 in the conditions, if you wanted to use that July 12th of 2021 as the council date for that, that would be a planning commission on June 16th, and it would mean that plans would have to be submitted sometime there around May 3rd. So if you want to,
if I might,
just let me
hold
know
on
what.
just a second, Austin. Austin, hold on just a second. So I think it's important to understand that. So it is possible, right, that you can somewhat separate the construction from the planning. So Dave, you may have to correct me on this, but so is that area shown on their existing site plan? Is that an approved parking area? So my question is, if they chose to pave that, do they have to go through a site plan modification? I don't remember.
No, they would not have to go through a site plan modification because it is shown as a parking area. If they want to use it in some other way, that's when we might get into the revision process.
So, and the reason why I bring that up, and sorry to if Mayor wants to let you speak, Austin, I'll let him. But so you could have the situation here where they don't want to make any modifications to their site, so they're not going to expand any of their buildings in 2021 because market reasons, whatever. So you could simply, I think, make a stipulation that they either, so instead of both, the opposite of that would be they either pave this area as a permanent parking area, or they submit revised site plan by whatever certain date that you want them to have it. And that may resolve some of the issues. So that right, if they don't submit a site plan by a certain date, then they have two options effectively. They can pave it or remove it. I mean, and so that addresses the one concern. The site planning process, for the most part, I think this was around, again, the concept that they were going to come back with the next phase of their project and do the parking in the next phase as a single project. And so they were going to have to do their site plan in order to expand the buildings, whether they expanded some, a lot, 3 or 4 buildings, they were going to have to come back and do a revised site plan. But the parking itself, according to Dave, and I think that is correct as I understand it, is simply whether it's paved or not. You can't leave an unpaved parking area permanently, but you could also say you have to meet the requirements of this site plan by some certain date.
Correct. So, Michael,
with site plan.
Yeah.
And I see Austin's on, so.
Yeah. So I was going to add to that. It's the same situation. So they've incorporated in their site plan already that's been approved these future phased building expansions, you know, the dashed lines that they have associated with the existing facilities. They could come in anytime and build a additional phase of this, just like they could with the parking area. They could bring that in at any time and not have to go through another revised site plan because they've got that. They're set on that piece of it. And I think that's what you're saying, Michael, is the same thing. So essentially, for the council members, you could, in this case, with the desire being that this still is paved parking area, you could set a date in June or July and say it'll be paved by that point, or a revised site plan will come in that's showing some other use to that. Is that what you were saying, Michael?
Effectively, yes. And I think Austin, I don't know if he has a comment.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make a slight comment just on the planning front from FASTENAL's end. I was thinking more about their processes here. And I know, you know, if we change the date to June, effectively we're going from an April date to a June date, and that's just a couple of months on their calendar. So I guess I know the initial question, and maybe I should have answered it more clearly at the time, was, okay, can we shorten this timeline? And I think my answer was yes, but you know, so capital expenditures, Dana Johnson, who is the one who's interacted a lot with Michael Webb in dealing with, you know, providing the path along the back, etc. You know, he has to go get CapEx money from his CFO every year for projects such as these. So I guess that is one big dynamic of changing it to next June compared to beginning of 2021 that impacts their planning, is the capital expenditures money that goes wherever it goes. So I guess that's just something from the applicant's perspective that I know you guys are, you already voted on the one item, but
so
in terms of planning, that those are impacts from the applicant's end.
So Austin, and we may have to get Lisa on the phone, and I can call her. I know she can hear us, but we can't hear her. So I think another option potentially, if Austin, is some of this you need to get with your client. Could we defer final action on this item until our January meeting? I mean, clearly they're not going to get this paved in the next 30 days. We have a recommendation standing from the Planning Commission, so that that could be there. I think it's just a matter, since we've had a motion and a second, could we have a revised, and I'm just trying to see if there's a solution here. You know, could this be deferred until the January 15th meeting, which would give Austin the ability to meet with his client, which is FASTENAL, on some of these questions that have been raised. And I don't know what the council's feelings on that, but if that's something you might want to consider, I can grab my phone and give Lisa a quick call. So
I was going to suggest the same idea there, Michael, is the possibility of tabling it to see if we can find a date that'll work, that may be a good date to consider for the change.
I would support that rather than us, the council give an arbitrary date that may not work. So, but I would certainly support a tabling of this.
hey, Lisa.
And try to.
Mayor, I'm going to have a quick call.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just spoke to Lisa and I've got her just on the phone here. So unless Dave has any issues, I think the council could, if it chose to, approve. So the original motion failed for approval, but you could place this on your meeting in January, which I believe is January 15th is your first meeting in January. So we defer this to a date specific for reconsideration. So if that's a motion that the council would like to consider as one of your options, I think that's okay, unless Dave has any other comments to that.
No, I don't have anything to add. I think your meeting date is actually January 11th.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. I don't have a calendar in front of me. So
yeah, I've got full boxes open here. So yeah.
Okay. So January 11th, if that, I'm not saying you have to, it's just an option if that gives both the council and the client an opportunity to see if there's an amenable date and time that works for both parties, I think we could do that. And I'll leave it at that, Mayor.
Yeah, so the floor is open for a motion if the council so chooses to defer this till January the 11th. There is no motion forthcoming. So, Mike, you tell us where we're going to go then.
Okay, so there is no further motion on the floor. I mean, we don't have a motion. So understand, we just had the motion failed to approve. So you have not denied the application. You simply haven't approved it. And generally, we need some recommendation. And I'm not sure what happens if there's none. We would have to probably, yeah. So the city attorney is saying there needs to be some resolution, either if there needs to be a second motion to not approve it, or some other motion to remand it, or a motion to defer it to future meeting.
Mike, I think since we've already voted on we didn't pass it, but instead of leave it at that, what I'm thinking maybe we could do is go ahead and vote to modify. And then that way we're not putting it off another month. But then if he talks to his people and there's something that they just can't get construction done for a month later, then come back to us. That way we're not tabling it and wasting a month if they're already limited on time.
And if that's your motion, I think that's fine. That's an option, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to move to modify the approval from Planning Commission regarding an extension request to have the area paved or final plans to the Planning Commission by June 16th.
Did she need a second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to modify the motion to have them have plans to the Planning Commission by, what was that, June what now?
16th.
16th, okay. So are there any questions about the motion?
I just want to clarify so that I make sure we're good on the motion. So what I heard was either pave by June 16th, have it paved by June 16th, or the plans being considered by the Planning Commission on June 16th, which means there would have to be an application before that. But I think that's what you were getting to on the motion. I just want to double check that.
Yeah, Dave, I'm pretty sure, and I was trying to follow along, but I'm pretty sure that was about the timeline you said would work out for them if they wanted to get construction going in the summer. But I believe if they have it paved, then the whole extension's pretty much mute anyway. So that gives them another option, as Mike pointed out.
Okay.
I think, Carolyn, what Dave is trying to say is that they really need to have their plans in April instead of June. Is that correct, Dave?
They would submit their plans actually in the early part of May. If they're not paving, okay. If they're not paving, then their plans would be submitted in the early part of May for consideration at the Planning Commission on June 16th. That's kind of what I heard you saying.
Well, that's what I wanted to clarify, because as I understand it, the plans need to be to the Planning Commission 2 months prior to that June date. So that we can keep the June date in there for the paving, but we need to modify the date for the application to be to the planning in May. You understand, Carolyn?
I think what the council member Cahart has said though was they would have to be before the Planning Commission on June 16th. That's what I was clarifying. As long as it's there, I can set that other timeline up.
Okay.
That's correct, Dave. If you could just make sure they're aware of the timelines to make that happen, that would be great.
Okay.
I'll make sure our new planner has that on his calendar as well.
Yep.
I think he's on here somewhere.
Okay, if there are no further questions, would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
No.
Cahart,
Yes.
MALT,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
and Mayor McTaggart.
Yes.
That is 4-1.
Okay, so the motion carries. Is that correct? So I will leave that up to you, Mike, or Zach, whoever's going to have a contact with Austin and get this thing all cleared up so that we can get this thing going sometime. Okay?
We will reach out and set up the meetings.
Okay, very good.
Really easy.
So now, Dave, given that motion, do we need to go on to item number 8 or just delay that one?
Well, we can go to item number 8. Are you up for it?
Yes,
I think I am. Yep. I think we're good to go to 8.
Okay. So item number 8 is consider recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission regarding following items. Rezoning of 9120, 9134 Wood End from C2 commercial retail to I-1, industrial non-hazard approved ordinance number 1036. Now, shall we take these individually?
Yeah, I would, again, this is Dave Knopik, planning consultant to the city of Edwardsville. Yeah, let me give you an overview. We're going to have a motion on each of these individual items, but if I can give you one, try to comprehensive staff overview so that you can see how the different things are linked. Hopefully we get the motions that we need to do in the right order and things like that. So if that's okay with you, Mayor, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So as mentioned before, this has a multiple number of items going on at 9120, 9134 Wood End Road. This is the on-the-go convenience store that is currently operating at the 9134 property, I believe. And then the 9120 property is a vacant parcel that is between the convenience store and the FedEx drive. I'm just going to try to give you the brief overview here. On August 4th of 2020, the property owner filed their applications requesting a rezoning and proposing a preliminary and final development plan for the land that the address indicated. As part of that also, they do need to replat the property. It's currently platted in 3 parcels, and they are proposing a replat to 2 parcels. That replat proposal was submitted on October 16th of 2020. The overall development site is approximately 2.5 acres, so it's a relatively small property overall. As mentioned before, the property is currently used as a service station, convenience store, and parking purposes, serving primarily automobile and truck traffic. This would be an expansion of some of the parking in that area for trucks, and then also providing a truck wash. And the truck wash is really the trigger that is placing this into a new zoning category, if you will. And in fact, there are some elements of the current convenience store, because of the truck functions, that require it also to be zoned I-1. It's been operating as a non-conforming use. So the rezoning would clean up the non-conforming uses, as well as allow the truck wash that is being proposed here. On November 18th of 2020, the Planning Commission held a public hearing in regard to the items. Staff and the applicant spoke at the public hearing. There were no specific objections to the proposed use voiced as part of the public hearing, and no protest petitions were received in regard to the item. I think what I want to do here is talk just briefly to the 4 different pieces that we've got before us, and I'm kind of using the guide of your agenda memo for tonight. The rezoning piece there, again, is a rezoning from C2 commercial retail to I1 industrial non-hazard. And I want to note that the rezoning proposal, as the ordinance is written, that's been cited already as part of this item number, or zoning ordinance 1036, has a reversionary clause in it. So if you'll recall, when we do rezonings that have development plans and plats associated with them, the rezoning can be approved by the governing body, but then that reversionary clause allows for 12 months to gain the approval of a final or preliminary development plan, as well as getting their final plat approved and filed. In this case, everything's coming in simultaneously, so I would assume that the reversionary requirements will be met without a problem here. But the actual map adjustment and publication of the ordinance will not occur until that final plat is filed and the final plan is approved. So I just wanted to make that clear about the rezoning aspect of this. The preliminary development plan in your packet, there's a lot of pages here. I did stamp each of those preliminary development plan sheets so that you knew which documents we were referring to. But in regard to that preliminary development plan, the staff and the Planning Commission recommended approval of the materials dated August 4th of 2020 and revised to address the city comments transmitted in later in August, and then resubmitted and dated October 8th. So when you think about this, when we do these simultaneous, they're first submittal, we consider their preliminary development plan submittal, and then after it's been revised and gotten to the point of detail that it qualifies as a final development plan, that's when we do the final development plan. And therefore, you'll note that there's on your packet the materials dated November 6th of 2020 are the final development plan materials. So if you approve of the rezoning, which is really a land use question, if you're comfortable with this land use in this location as well as other land uses in the I-1 zoning district, that's what you're looking at with the rezoning. Now, what's intriguing about the preliminary plan and the final development plan as well as the plat is that one of the conditions that we are placing on the development plan as well as the plat is that the property can only be used for uses that are allowed in both the C3 and the I-1 district. So what I want to be careful of with this is, hopefully everybody understands that, if a use that is allowed in the I-1 district but not in the C3 district is proposed on this property in the future as a redevelopment or something like that, it will not be allowed per the development plan or the plat, because they'll both have notes on there as to what can happen. Only uses that are in those two districts listed would be allowed here. So we can talk a little bit about that later, but in the final development plan, you'll see I've listed for you, there's 8 conditions that the Planning Commission approved as part of the final development plan. That first one is what I was talking about, where only uses, so we've basically limited the uses through the development plan that are in C3 and in I-1 would be allowed in this district, plus the truck wash facility. The other elements that you have here that are conditions really had to do with some of the bigger items that we've talked about with this site plan. There was a lot of issues regarding access and pedestrian functions that go on in this area, as well as automobile and truck traffic. So you'll see there condition number 2, the proposed width of the access drive, as well as the addition of the right turn deceleration lane will be subject to further review and approval by the city and KDOT staff. A pedestrian sidewalk and trail meeting, meeting city and KDOT requirements be placed along the south side of the property with a pedestrian connection to the entry of the convenience store building. Interesting to note here, one of the things that we have in this area is that since the city removed parking being allowed under the interstate bridges and put up no parking signs, there are people who use this parking lot and will park their car here and walk down to the river to fish. And so there is a pedestrian element to this that's kind of unusual for this area, and therefore that's why we're recommending that condition. Number 4, the use of architectural materials and colors be complementary and compatible with the existing convenience store and building. We need to get some more details as part of this piece in regard to those materials and everything. So we just ask that those details come in, that they're subject to the staff review and approval as part of the building permit plans. The final on-site stormwater analysis and solutions be provided subject to city staff approval prior to building permit issuance. This is a very tight site to develop. And as you know, just to the north of this site, there are some wetlands. There is also floodplain issues in this area. And so the stormwater analysis needs further investigation before it gets approved. Condition number 6, that further landscape plans and details be provided to the city staff for review and approval, and that all landscape planting areas and turf along Wood End Road be irrigated. Number 7, the signage and lighting provided as part of the final development plan be subject to further review by staff regarding specific locations, details, and requirements. There are not very many signs proposed for this or lighting, but they would be subject to our sign permit application and approval process. And then finally, that they meet all applicable federal, state, and local regulations and acquire the appropriate required permits. So there are conditions associated with the final development plan. The final plat or the replat, really, as far as that goes, you're part of that process, since the Planning Commission approved it with these 4 conditions. Again, adding that note regarding the allowable uses, cleaning up typographical errors, doing the final review by the technical reviewers to make sure everything's in good shape for filing and recording, and then meeting the submittal and filing requirements of the Eugene County Surveyor. Those are pretty standard conditions on final plats. But your job tonight is to essentially accept, if you will, the dedication of easements and right-of-ways per that final plat sheet. So that's the rough overview. The way that we would approach this is kind of in the order that I've got it presented here. We would first talk about the zoning piece of this and take a motion on that. Then we can move to the preliminary development plan and the final development plan, and finally the plat itself as we move through this. So we'll need motions on each one of those components. The analysis is provided in the staff report that we provided to the Planning Commission. I am not going to read all of that or go through all of that, but I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you might have. With that, I will stop. And again, I'm not sure if we do have applicant representation here or not. So I'll answer questions at first, and Zach, if we do have applicants, let me know.
I believe we do have a representative from the applicant online.
With that, Mike, do you want me to allow the applicant to make any comments, or do we want to move ahead with the motions?
Well, it's not a public hearing, so that would be your call if you.
All right. So, well, all right.
It's not necessary.
The first item would be the motion is for rezoning of 9120, 9134 Wood End from C2 to commercial retail to I1 industrial non-hazard, approve ordinance number 1036.
So Mayor, just to clarify from earlier, do you want to go to each person, each council person before the final motion? It may make it easier in case there's comments that can be addressed before the motion. We're happy to do that and then get the motion. It may save some time. So you may want to just go ask each council member.
Hey, Councilmember Cahar.
Dave, I guess the only question I would have is, have there been any issues with this landowner and business over? Have they worked well with our city and been a good business and worked well with codes?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I know. There is some history with the property that Michael may want to add to this, Mr. Webb may want to add. I do know that we've had some discussion about the landscape conditions as well as the site conditions. I'm not aware of any current code violations or anything to that extent, but I know there's been discussion that the landscaping really needs to be taken care of. And I think that's part of the reason why you see that requirement for irrigation and maintenance elements as far as a condition of the development plan. But Michael, would you want to comment on more? I don't have a whole lot of background on the history of the property per se.
Yeah, I don't know that there, I mean, zoning is more to do with use than other items. I think we have raised a couple of times landscaping, maintenance of the landscaping, maintenance of the site. Generally, they have been responsive to those requests. Some of it has to do just the general use when you have trucks and, some of that parking. We've had problems with tires and things like that, but they have corrected those when we brought code enforcement issues to them. So to the best of my knowledge, we've never had to cite them or take any formal action. It generally has been a verbal or just a letter stating these conditions exist, you need to correct them, and they get corrected.
Okay, Councilmember Cahar, is that all? Okay, Councilwoman Malott.
Yeah.
The only question I would have would, when there's rezoning, is there any conflicts with any of the adjoining landowners or the businesses as far as like traffic?
Yeah. Not with the,
Close to FedEx and all that. Any conflicts arise?
yeah. Now,
Go ahead.
from a use standpoint, there aren't any conflicts. I would say, what you do have with Wood End Road is that mixing of automobile traffic and truck traffic, but that's the nature of not just the uses, but the interchange. You have employees to many of the users in this area already. So you do have quite a few traffic movements going on between the interchange and FedEx Drive. Of course, Dot Foods is in now on the south side, and they're bringing truck traffic in too. But that is also part of the reason why there are proposed improvements, such as the right-hand turn lane, the deceleration lane. I think through the traffic study and the width of the access drive that's being provided, that should create some better scenarios on turning movements, at least going into the facility itself. Coming out, I don't believe that the traffic study showed a dramatic increase in trucks because of the truck wash. This would be serving a lot of the truck traffic that's already coming to this destination. Michael, was there anything there that?
No, one of our concerns that I think we addressed through not necessarily on the zoning side, but on the site planning side, but it all goes together, and you can see it on the plan. Early on, they wanted that driveway to be closer up into the truck wash, and we felt our biggest concern was stacking on the road. So I think we all know that there's a lot of trucks down there. It only takes a couple of them and you start to have conflict. So one of the things that we wanted was if there's going to be stacking, we want it to be on their property and not out onto the road. So there are adjustments to the site plan, the addition of the continuous lane improvements on Wood End, and we basically required them to widen the driveway, even though that's really not our typical standard for an industrial drive, but felt having the 3 lanes and the extra width to get truck movements would help move traffic off of Wood End, which is our primary concern. So I think the site plan addressed that as well as it can address it. It would be nice to have multiple points of ingress and egress to sites, but that's just not how this site was laid out many years ago. I don't believe we had any public comments at all at the meeting, or even comments from adjacent property owners. So there wasn't any comments from those other adjacent property owners that they had concerns.
That's correct, Michael. We got no comments from any of the adjacent property owners.
Okay, and then the other thing I was going to question was the wetlands that are behind it, and as far as their drainage, and I don't know how truck washers work. Do they recycle the wash materials, or are they pumping it out into a sewer? What are they doing with their waste? Is that a concern?
Some of it, generally car washes, a large portion is a recycled water, but by law, they can't discharge that water out into the common ditch or into the wetlands. So the water that they collect into the drainage within the building will either be recycled or it will go ultimately to the sanitary sewer system. But they have grease traps prior to their access, and they may be subject to an industrial discharge permit, which we work with the unified government on that. So certain uses, whether it's by volume or type of discharge into the wastewater system, requires an industrial waste permit, and they'll be subject to that review through the unified government. It's really more concerning about wastewater plant operations, which is why we've left that component in our contract with the UG, have left that for them because they have the expertise to implement those permits and to follow up on them because they require some extra work.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Councilmember Shriver?
I have no questions. Garrett pretty much covered a lot of it. Thank you.
Councilmember Stites?
Yeah, I do. I'm not able to see the stipulations here on mine. I'm sorry about that. But I think it was number 6. Was that the one addressing stormwater?
Number 5.
5. Okay. Now, I'm not 100% sure, and I'm really not questioning how the process is, but is it typical that we would make these approvals prior to those things coming back? And, I mean, I think it would be important to find out the stormwater and what, if the applicant, wants to carry on with what's going to happen during those things. So that was one of my questions there.
Right. So I would tell you, typically we would have a final kind of stormwater analysis and solution that would be presented with the site plan itself. I might defer this if the engineer is on, and I can't tell by the initials here, but we may defer to the engineer for just a second. This is not an easy site for handling the stormwater analysis, and therefore we were comfortable that some preliminary things were being looked at, but the final solution part of this and the final calculations and other elements, we felt that in working with our city engineer could be figured out here at the end. So I think I'm going to defer. Daniel, are you on?
Before Dan speaks, I would note that on the preliminary development plan, there is on-site stormwater detention. I think the questions are more about stormwater quality discharge, but I may be wrong. So I'll let Dan address those. But there is on the development plan an area for on-site detention, and
Correct.
I'll have to let him address as to its ability to carry all the stormwater or what capacities and the quality issues. So Dan,
and I don't know that, and I don't think it's just that. It's just typically that we have a complete package in front of us prior to it getting to this point where we're voting on, zoning changes and those types of things. We know, I mean, it's to the point where the package is completed.
right. I don't know that we would typically have it at point of zoning. I think it would be, we would typically have a preliminary drainage concepts in the preliminary, and then the final plan would be the place that we would there and or at the building permit phase that we would require final design of the stormwater system. As far as what the standards are, the standards are set. We basically use APWA standards, and so, but I think it would be helpful if maybe Dan can just quickly discuss what the plans are, what's completed and what's not yet completed.
Yep. So my name is Dan Finn, civil engineer, Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas. So at this time, we did include a stormwater basin along kind of the western edge of the property and the northern edge of the property. With the submittal, we did include kind of analysis and stated with the analysis that we are providing detention to meet the city's standards. With the basin, it is a very tight site, as Dave mentioned. The freeboard we were providing between our berm and the 100-year water surface elevation was right at the threshold. Also, the area for the discharge with our outlet pipe was very close to the property line, and there was question if we can get the riprap installed at the outlet. So there were a few really minor details with the stormwater report that with the review and the comments, they wanted us to analyze a little further. And so that is what we'll be looking at with the final report. As necessary, if we have to pull that pavement back a little bit to get a little more room for the berming, to get a little more freeboard, or if we have to pull it back a little bit to get that outlet pipe in, that's what we'll be doing with our final plans and our final stormwater report that will go in with the building permit plans. But there will be detention on that northwest corner, and it will meet all the requirements of the city.
I think also Councilmember Stites, in regard to a couple of the other items, with the decel lane and along here near the interchange of the interstate. So the couple of the items that still were calling out for KDOT approval, there may be things that KDOT would like to see done that may be modifications, functional modifications to the plan, but are necessary because of where we are in relationship to that. So on a couple of those items, especially the access width and the location of the right turn decel lanes, things like that, we really have to have a coordinated effort through the public improvement plans portion of this to really nail down those details there. And that's a little atypical. We usually do not have a site where we're dealing with the KDOT, in some ways access management also within close proximity to these interchanges and with the functions that are going on there. So that's why those conditions are kind of left a little more open than we would like at this point in time. The other couple of the landscape plans and details, they do show landscaping. Literally what we're missing there are some of the planting details, the types of plants that would be used, as well as how they would be placed in those beds and things. So again, it's a matter of some details. The concepts are there and the principles are there, but I would say there's a little more work that we would like to see before staff is completely comfortable with this. But we were comfortable on a number of these items with the way that the applicant's been working with us to address our comments and questions. It's just a matter of getting them finalized.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the answer. One of the questions that I had is if the road that would be to the west, which is you see a couple entrances that are going off of that going west, that's a private road, is that correct? That's running north and south, and I think that's the FedEx road, is that correct?
That's correct. That is a private road. It's FedEx property. FedEx is very protective of that. It's one of the hard parts with this site to do any getting that second access. If we all had a preference, and I think even the applicant, if there was a preference, we would have some kind of access point going to the west to connect to that drive. But unfortunately, that's not a public road. And it is controlled access by FedEx, and they do not want other traffic on that road going into the entry to their facility.
Well, I can respect that. It's theirs. They paid for it. I get it. Now, so those lines that we're seeing that they look like they represent driveways. That's just probably a conceptual type drawing that it looks like they go to the west off of that road.
I think those are drainage. Those are drainage structures.
Okay. All right. I was going to say that's off a little. Maybe they're just bicycle driveways.
No, they're drainage. Basically, just flumes that go from the edge of the road down into somewhat ditch area.
All right. So, so I'm down in this area every day, and traffic is definitely an issue. I mean, it gets backed up. With the truck traffic that's turning out to the egress, it gets stacked up currently, and you have automobile traffic that go there at 7 in the morning and see what this is like. It's pretty crazy, and you'll have these trucks sitting there waiting to turn to go east on Wood Inn, and automobiles are just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you could be sitting there for easily 15 to 20 minutes, 15 minutes for sure, just waiting to get out because of all the traffic that's heading down, and trucks can't get out. Now, so my question would be, which that's not good. But what about if that area was to ever become signalized? Is the distance from 435 off ramp, is that distance something that KDOT would, is that within the allowable distance of a signalized location?
I don't know that I have an answer for that, a specific answer. Michael, do you know?
Well, yeah, what we know is that to effectively where the drive sits today is under KDOT access control. So that driveway is basically at the edge of their access control. Whether it provides sufficient distance for signals, I know they've looked at whether it meets the signal warrants, and I think they feel that the warrant meets on the other side, on the east side. So what would be the northbound on-off ramps versus the southbound? I'm not quite sure why that one is warrants better than this one, but so it's outside of their access control. So they may have comments. They absolutely will be the determining factor on the widening of this Wood End Road section. And if for some reason that's not approved, that would be a significant issue, because the point you make about stacking, it has been our concern. So we feel if that extra lane is there, that trucks that are turning in will be able to do so freely versus the trucks that are going to the FedEx Drive or going on down, to 96th or 98th Street. So that will be, without that there, I mean, it's already a problem, and certainly additional traffic will continue to make that worse than there. But I think any signal at those on-off ramps will require KDOT's approval, because they would be within their right of way. So that would be no different than, say, the one at K32 and 435. So those are local signals as far as ownership and maintenance, but they require the approval of KDOT. So they approve them to be installed. You have to meet their standards, and then whatever local jurisdiction has to maintain those signals and keep them up to signal standards. And certainly KDOT can have some words if you fail to do that.
How does that drive access align with the south side of Wood End? And I'm not sure. I think it's the dot food is further to the west. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. The what we call 93rd Street, which is then the entrance into the dot facility or the old Kincaid facility, is aligned with the FedEx Drive, which was when we did the Wood End Road widening. That was the intention. We actually wanted to continue the center median such that it would take you all the way to the FedEx Drive, but in order to do that, we would have had to have a secondary ingress egress from this site that you're seeing onto what is owned by FASTENAL. We did have discussions about trying to acquire that property, but they were not open to that at all. So because we have this full access, in other words, instead of it being right in, right out only, we had to shorten the median and to allow that traffic to go across and make left and right turning movements.
Yeah, I understand, and I know what Dave, I think it was Dave said, it would be servicing the vehicles that are already going in there to fuel or to do, conduct their business or whatever they're doing. But I can't help but to think that there won't be additional traffic added to this location from all of the other truck activities that we have, businesses down Wood End. I think that this is going to only increase, and I think increase by a lot, the amount of truck traffic, and create just monumental problems down there with people getting in and out of that already congested gas station, because it's a mess now. And I don't believe that this makes it any better. I don't ever see issues so much of people getting in. It's always leaving. They stack up there to leave to go back to 435.
Yeah.
And I think our concern was that's really why, if they were going to do this, we wanted that driveway to the car wash pushed as far back as possible. Because again, originally it was, you know, everybody kind of knows that first driveway, if you're going to go to Subway or the kind of the more car traffic, was at that location. And our concern was one or two trucks back, you know, stacked on in there, then didn't allow trucks to turn in or turn out. And especially if they were turning in off of Wood End and then trying to turn into the car or the truck wash, they wouldn't be able to make a turn into the truck wash, and then that backs up onto the road. So again, not to sound horrible here, but if there's going to be stacking, we'd rather the stacking be on the applicant or the business site and not on the public roadway. I mean, that's where
and I would agree with that. I guess my only kind of a little bit of an issue is I would hate for that to come at the cost of the automobile person that's coming in there to get a Subway sandwich, or to get a, you know, it almost looks like, you know, somebody would get in there and say, you know what, I'll never do this again. I'm going to go to the station somewhere else where I'm not going to get stuck in traffic for 20 minutes waiting on. Right. So, I mean, I understand. I get it. And I know it's a very challenging site. And it's just, I think that we're making, putting more of a problem on a problem we already have. We're adding to it. How does this align with our is it the golden rules, the 13, or Dave or Mike? I'm not sure. How does this go with those?
Yeah. So in that analysis, like you said, there's the 13 kind of rules there. The I-1 zoning falls in line with basically everything that is, you know, in that area. All the property surrounding this is zoned I-1 currently. So there's a consistency here in the sense that the same or similar zonings in the area. I think what helps us, though, is that we're through the development plan and through the plat, we're limiting the uses on the property. The zoning in and of itself would allow you to have all the I-1 uses that you could have there. And that's just not acceptable. We really don't want to have another truck warehouse or distribution facility here, which could be more truck oriented. Some of the manufacturing type uses and things like that, this site would never work for. So that's why what's nice here through the development plan and the plat is we can actually have those notes that limit the uses in here, so that we don't end up in a redevelopment scenario down the road with something that's allowed by I-1, and then we go, boy, that intensity is just wrong. You know, it just doesn't fit. So we've tried to limit that use from intensifying too much. I do want to clarify, Councilmember Stites, on the traffic, because I just want to make sure everybody understands. I think we're all in agreement that there will be some additional truck traffic that comes here, and I don't know if we want to have Dan comment a little bit on the traffic analysis. I just know that the anticipation of the traffic analysis was that, or the traffic study was that it wouldn't be, how do I want to call it, a significant increase in new traffic coming to this area, but we may want to have that comment so that we get a feel for what the intensity is there that's projected.
Yeah, again, Dan Finn with Phelps Engineering. To speak with that, we did have a traffic engineer study the truck wash and how many trips it was going to generate. It is kind of seen more of as an auxiliary use to existing truck owners and truck users of this facility. It's typically not going to be a wash that you're driving down the highway, an F-150 that's going to see it and it's going to get off the highway to use. This is specifically for truckers, using this facility. And so the traffic study did indicate there would be, during the peak hour, an extra 6 trucks in and an extra 6 trucks out of the facility. So it does have a slight increase, but very slight in that. And looking at the traffic as a whole there right now, without the approval of this plan or the widening of the entrance, you really have the existing entrance that is a problem and a bottleneck with all the additional vehicles already up and down this area. So the one benefit of this plan is you are adding a facility, like Dave said, that has a pretty small amount of truck traffic compared to most industrial uses that could be approved in this area. And with it, we are significantly widening that entrance. With that entrance, it is set up with the striping. We worked back and forth with the city quite a bit to get the best setup for the striping possible to allow vehicles to exit eastbound, exit westbound, and enter at the same time. So it will be set up to where we can stack 2 full semi-trailers waiting to exit west and still have vehicles bypassing and exiting east at the same time, and also still have vehicles entering from westbound and eastbound. So it does provide significant more access in and out. And if trucks are stacked up waiting to exit east, it still allows exits to the west, which is not allowed right now. So it does generate a little more traffic. It was about 6 in and 6 out during the peak hour, but that's pretty minimal for this acreage of industrial development. And it does significantly increase that driveway access that's there today.
I can appreciate the study, and also that someone says that it will generate 6 more vehicles. I'm not sure how they ever came up with that one, but again, when we talk about the widening of the driveways and the extra lane there, and that it's considerably wider than somebody else down the road that has more truck traffic, and that's true. But here's the issue: is that it's not, they're not coming in there in and out and in and out and in and out all day long and stopping it at a fuel center. And I understand that this isn't an automobile, necessarily an automobile pull off of 435, but the amount for an F-150 to pull in there and get your truck washed, I get that. I don't think that there'll be some, but not, I don't know how many, but the amount of truck traffic, and I'm talking tractor trailers, that's going down Wood End is significant. And I like, again, I never see, I appreciate the westbound turn lane going out, but that's not where people are going. They're coming off of 435, they're turning in there, doing their business, and they're turning right back out to go to 435. They're not, most of them that go in there are not continuing on west on Wood End. And that's all I have there to say.
So Mayor, and I'll let, I mean, we have a number of items. I don't know if there's other comments at this point, but the first item is the zoning request. And like our last item, it's the same, pretty much the same process and the same vote. So Dave, if he wants to reiterate the recommendation from Planning Commission, you would then need a motion and a second for whatever option, and then it requires 4 votes to support that motion, whatever that motion may be.
Okay. Is that clear to the city council? Dave, do you need to make any more comments?
No, I was just going to suggest that on the zoning, what the staff of Planning Commission have recommended is a motion to approve the ordinance 1036 that would change the zoning at 9120 and 9134 Wood End Road from C2 commercial retail to I1 industrial non-hazard, noting that the rezoning would be contingent upon meeting the reversionary requirements within 12 months of city approval.
Okay, and Mike, if I understand your comment correctly, the zoning change is more of a protective measure, beneficial to the city. Is that correct?
Well, it's a use, and I think what Dave was saying was what the one whereas they have to, any future use, just because somebody comes and tells us they're going to use a particular piece of property a particular way is not what zoning is about. It's about future use. But this particular one has 2 elements. Number one, the way it's set up with the site plan, they have to be in both categories, I1 and C3, not one or the other.
Okay.
Typically, if you had I1, you could do a lesser zoning like a C3. You can't go the other way with I1 use in a C3. So there's some protection there. The reversionary basically will require all these other items to be approved. And if they're not ultimately approved, I mean, that is the extra staff comments, et cetera. If those are not addressed within the 12 months, then the zoning will revert back to its C2 zoning use, and there's where you're at. I got that right, Dave?
Yeah, that's correct. So, for instance, the zoning that you would be looking at here, if you approve this, would allow all uses that are allowed under I1 zoning. The limitation to use would come through the preliminary and final development plan and the plat.
Okay, very good. Okay, without further comments, the floor will entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 1036.
I do have another comment, and it would be Mike. So I'm really concerned about the signalization possibilities, pros and cons, and what KDOT would allow in the future. I'm not sure what that distance is from 435. I know that I had been involved in a development, same situation off of 435 onto Parallel, and there was they allowed a right turn, right in and right out, but really wanted to be a signalized location, but there could only be, so many feet away from the off ramp, and it's kind of the same setup as we're looking at right here. I don't know if it ever becomes signalized down at the 93rd Street, maybe, but if we had that, I don't know. I'm just wanting to make sure that we don't create a problem by not finding out what KDOT would allow, or what when we do end up signalizing this in the future. Somewhere we know that there's going to eventually need to be a signalized intersection there.
I don't know that I have much comment on that, other than, and it shows on the final plat as well, which is currently, there's the area that's under the control, which means they can't have any driveways in that area. And I want to say, my eyes aren't that good, but I think it's either 250 or 300 feet from the corner of this property. And of course, the road, between the center of the roadways is farther than that, just from the center of the driveway to the center of the on-off ramp. But I don't know of anything. I don't know that I could give you an answer to say that if we do this, we can't signalize it, or if we do this, it won't keep us from signalizing it. I don't think we've had those comments. I don't know if the applicant looked at that. I know Trans Systems, on behalf of the state, back in 2018, looked at the overall on-off ramps. I think their recommendation was to build, which we didn't necessarily concur with, but they had proposed the possibility of redoing the whole thing and putting 2 roundabouts at the 2 on-off ramps. And I don't think that was something we were very supportive of. But so I don't know that there's any, and these conditions exist now. So I don't know that there's, again, anything that would prevent a signal from being at that location, but we've not had any discussions with KDOT that this change, and that I'm aware of, that this change would have any impacts on discussions of signalizations. Typically, they either meet the warrant or don't. If you were trying to build a new driveway between their existing driveway and the on-off ramp, that wouldn't be permitted by KDOT. That I'm certain of. So I don't have anything else to add to that.
Okay, we're back to a motion.
I'll see where this goes. I'm going to make the motion to accept the planning commission's recommendation of rezoning 9120, 9134 Wood End Road from C2 commercial, retail I1, industrial non-hazard, and approve ordinance number 1036, finalizing the same.
And this is, I want to be clear, this is for just the rezoning, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1036. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
KR,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver.
Yes.
And Mayor McTaggart.
Yes. Okay, the next item is the primary and final plan for 9120, 9134 Wood End. Dave?
Yeah, briefly, it would be two motions here. The preliminary development plan, the Planning Commission has recommended approval of the preliminary development plan materials dated August 4th, revised to address city comments that were transmitted on August 21st, and resubmitted materials dated October 8th of 2020, subject to the approval of a final development plan. So the recommendation would be approval of the preliminary development plan materials with those dates listed, subject to the approval of a final development plan.
Okay, we're going to go through questions and comments. Carolyn?
Look, as Councilmember Stites was speaking, I kind of could understand the concern, not so much of someone seeing a car wash or truck wash off the highway and coming down, but huge, long semi trucks slowing down, getting over, and there's only so many semi trucks that can fit into a deacceleration lane before it backs up onto Wood End. Could you explain just, and I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but just a little bit more as far as the traffic study? Did they recommend putting a signal in, or what was their concern about? Because what I don't want to do is be a frustration to all of our other businesses that are down there, where it's just too much of a pain to get in and out of the highway, and then they're getting upset with us.
I might let the engineer, Dan, do you want to comment on the traffic study to answer that question?
Yes, the traffic study analyzed really just the amount of vehicles coming in and out with the new facility, and then looked at the availability of adding the turn lane from the off ramp if there was space available to provide that, and then also the setup for that. Beyond that, I do not believe it analyzed if a signal would be warranted in this location, or even if a signal would be possible in this location. So I don't think that has been looked at this point. If this does get approved as the condition, we do have to work with KDOT with this turn lane and any of their requirements. So that will open up a lot more discussion with KDOT going forward if this does move forward as a project. But at this time, I believe the traffic study only looked at the number of trips coming in and out with the new facility, and then also the feasibility of adding a turn lane to help with the entrance and the exit.
Dan, do you know what the existing, I know it was in the, I don't have traffic study with me, but what the existing trip numbers are at that location? So I know you're talking about 6 vehicles at peak hours.
Mm-hmm.
You have what the current is and maybe what the overall 24-hour count is, new trips. It may help.
The overall, the new trips, overall 24 that are being added during an average weekday is 216. I do not have the traffic study, just looked at the car wash. It did not have the analysis of the existing facility in the table in the reports. So I don't have that number to compare how much that is increasing versus the existing.
And could you repeat the first part of that? You kind of broke up.
The average weekday that the self-service wash will be adding is 216 vehicles. That is based on more of a self-service car wash. There is nothing in the traffic manual that is specific to a truck wash. This is more for a self-service car wash. So a 2-bay self-service car wash will typically add 216 vehicles a day. During the AM peak hour is 12 total, 6 in and 6 out, and then the same in the PM peak hour.
So I might just add on this. So when we talk about traffic studies, there's a Institute of Traffic Engineers, I think what it is, ITE. And so it takes uses and conditions from really all, different places and studies. So a car wash as an example. So how many trips does it generate in a real life situation, and then tries to project what that might be, on another use. I mean, they do that from, a home may have a generation of, 9 vehicle trips per day, and a vehicle trip is considered an in and an out. So if you go, if you're at your house and, you leave in the morning, that's a trip, and you come back at lunch, and then you leave at lunch, there's 2 more trips, and you come back in the afternoon, that's a trip, and you go to the grocery store. That when they talk about trips, they're talking about either going to or from a particular location in any given period of time. And then peak hours are generally those that we typically think of as peak hours. Sometimes those may be adjusted based on a local place. So just trying to give some comprehension to the travel. I don't recall what the total number of vehicles is on Wood End Road, but I want to say it's probably 3,000 or better vehicles per day. That's a little bit of a guess. K32 as an example is around 12,000 to 14,000 vehicles per day. So just to give you some ideas. I mean, we all drive those roads, so we have a pretty good understanding of them. So thank you, Dan.
Okay. My gosh, I'm trying to, Garrett, it's your turn. I almost got lost where we were at. Yeah, go ahead.
I've been lost for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm ready to make the motion to approve this. So you can move on down the line if you want.
Oh, let's get the rest of the comments before we move on a motion. So if you have nothing further to add, we'll move on to Margaret. Margaret, have you got any comments or questions?
No, I don't have any comments.
Thank you. Chuck, do you have any more?
I do. The 6 that is in the study that says that it could increase by 6. It's interesting because all it would take is for one of the business that's farther to the east or west to say that this is where we'd like for you guys to start washing your trucks, and that could very easily go above 6 really easily, and a problem. Now I will tell you what I would like to see before we move forward. I would like to see what KDOT and according to what Daniel was saying, there is what KDOT says about if it warrants signalization, and what that would do for in the future. So how I would support this is if we get that study or that information back from KDOT, so that we know where that stands before I make a decision on that.
And if I might just add, Mayor, and Dave can touch. So you have preliminary plan and final plan, and I may just let Dave kind of touch base real quick, even though oftentimes when we do projects, we do these concurrently, but in some places you have a preliminary plan, which is, I don't want to say concept because it's more than the concept, but it lays out the parameters, where the final plan is basically what's going to get built. And Dave, why don't you touch on that a little bit more? So we have 2 separate actions here.
And I think this is where you get into that issue when we run these simultaneously, the preliminary and final plan on the same agenda. If there's hesitation by the council or the governing body, and you desire to wait for that KDOT approval, I would do it for the preliminary plan and the final, because in many ways, when you approve the preliminary plan, you're basically telling the applicant that you're good with everything there, right? So they can progress to that final stage and add all those details and things like that. And this is kind of when I say this is more of a logistics kind of response than anything else. I don't want to send a mixed message that says, yeah, we're kind of okay with this, but now that we've seen the final, we still want more details. So it would be easier if the council does have hesitation here, or the council or governing body has hesitation. I would prefer, I think, to have both the preliminary and the final plan held for further input from KDOT versus maybe approving the preliminary plan as shown and then holding the final plan.
Okay.
I think that might be cleaner.
Who makes that request of KDOT? The applicant or the city?
It'll probably be at the end of the day, it'll probably be a combined discussion. I think the applicant needs to go to KDOT and approach KDOT and get that information and see what's going on there. But I think the city's going to have to be engaged in that conversation. Correct, Michael?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. I think it would be a joint, I don't want to say joint effort, but I mean, it'd be a probably joint meeting with KDOT and the applicant and the city, just to make sure everybody's in the same place and the same understanding. If that's,
So if I was to make a motion on that, would it be with the addition, or how would the motion need to be? Would this one need to be denied? Or, I mean, I know this always gets tricky here, but I'm in favor of making, here's what I will say. I'm in favor of making a motion that says that I would like to, if it's called table it until we have that information back from KDOT before I approve, or before, that would be how I would like the motion.
I think you could do something like that. Michael, I'm going to ask you a question on this just to make sure. In some ways, I'm wondering if a motion to send it back to Planning Commission with the idea of getting further information from KDOT and getting some of these refinements may be a better approach. And then that way the Planning Commission gets access to that information, that detail, and we're not necessarily holding this in limbo, but certainly would give us some timeline there to work with. I don't know how you feel about that.
yeah, that's probably a good idea, just to keep them in the loop, but we don't have to, just to verify, we don't have to re-advertise or re-public hearing this item. They would be remanding it back for additional information on traffic impacts and signalization, basically.
Correct. So
Preliminary plans.
right, we're not
plans, yeah.
but I
Chuck,
think
did you get that?
I didn't hear what the mayor said. It cut out.
Okay, I asked, did you understand Mike's comments to send it back to the Planning Commission for those particular items that we need to see addressed?
Yes, I make a motion that we send it back to Planning Commission with the understanding that we want additional information regarding, including a KDOT study that would warrant or give us information on signalization between 435 and 93rd Street.
Okay, very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm not going to repeat that, Chuck. I hope everybody got it, but anyway.
I will ask for a point of clarification though on the motion. Is that for both the preliminary plan and the final development plan?
Good point of clarification. That would be for both. I'm sorry.
Thank you both. Thank Dave and thank you, Chuck. So anyway, we are ready to have the roll call. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
KR,
Yes.
MALT,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
and Mayor McTaggart.
Yes. Okay, we beat everybody up tonight.
Yeah,
Let's go.
so Dave, how do we want to handle, do we want to defer the plat or that's more of a, I mean, it's doesn't have much, I mean, unless the driveway moved, and I don't see that, so I mean.
I think is Daniel,
Administrative technical, but.
yeah, is Daniel the only applicant representative on the call? Yeah.
Yes.
Daniel, I know that, and I'm sorry to the mayor and council, but because of the format here, I got to carry this conversation this way. Daniel, from the way I would understand this, deferring this item, essentially the governing body's action here would have to do with accepting easements and right-of-ways. They're not really approving the plat per se, but that could be deferred. You've got, with the rezoning, there's a 12-month period here to get that plat done and things like that. And obviously this is the last step. My concern is if we go forward and take action on this plat, but as a result of any discussion with KDOT, there's changes that may influence the way you're wanting to divide that property, we would have an approved plat that we would then have to go back and revise. So in a way, I'd almost like to see this deferred if you're comfortable with that, if you think your client would be comfortable with that.
I'll discuss it with him and can get back to you, or unless you need to know right now.
Well, I think the best thing, even if you need to discuss, would be to defer it then. Just
yeah, I don't see a problem deferring it from a timing standpoint at all with the project. So okay. I would say that it would be best to move forward with deferring it so it can run concurrently with the revised preliminary plan and final plan when it goes back through.
Yeah. So Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think the way to do this is to defer this action on this item, as Daniel's mentioned, until we have refined that preliminary and final plat. We can bring it back to you all together as one package. So we don't have to set a deferral date as next city council meeting. We can make it such that it's being deferred until we have the preliminary and final plat details put together to come back to you with.
Okay, so the what needs to happen then is that the motion that has been made and seconded needs to be withdrawn so that we can move forward on a deferral. So, Commissioner Stites.
No. I think you have. You've already had the motion. Yeah, the motion and seconds on the preliminary and final plat. We've already done that action. That one's already. It was just on the plat of whether we take that. So that was the next item, and I think what we're saying is that we would defer action on the plat to a future date. And
well, no, I don't think we're doing it.
Sending it back.
We're doing it. We're not doing it. We're not tying it to a date. We're tying it to when the preliminary and final plans are submitted. We're going to tie it to that way because we don't know when that date may be. I make a motion to defer any action on the plat for tonight until the the preliminary plan and the final plans are submitted.
Wait just a second. I think what we need to do is the first motion, Chuck and Carolyn, I think is to handle item B. Is that correct, Michael?
Well, I thought we had already voted on B.
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct.
So we either have to go ahead and move forward on B and then handle the deferral under C. Am I not right, Dave?
Yeah, the B, you're taking item B and you're rescinding it back to the plan.
That's right.
Right. I'm sorry. Motion in a second. I thought there was a vote.
We have to do another motion to defer C.
Correct.
Does everybody understand that? Okay. So right now, we're going to go ahead with the motion that has already been made and seconded, and then we'll follow that up with a deferral motion to handle item number C. So would the clerk please call roll?
Stites.
Okay, I understand what's being said here, but I thought we already voted on this.
I didn't think we voted. We started to vote and then.
Zach, did we vote on this, Zach?
No,
I've got a motion and a second, but I don't have a vote.
we
Okay,
did not
got it.
vote.
I say yes.
Yeah, okay, very good. Go ahead, Zach.
Behar,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Shriver,
Yes.
Stites, or excuse me, Mayor McTaggart.
Yes. Okay, now, Chuck, now make your motion about deferring item C.
I dang near forgot what it was now. Okay, so I make the motion that we are going to defer any action on the plat
Yeah, there you go.
until the preliminary plan and final plans are submitted or resubmitted to us.
Very
Yeah,
good.
until they come back to the council.
Okay. Now we need a second.
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 So we have a motion and a second to defer. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
Behar,
Yes.
Malat,
I need to have that motion reread to me because it's been cutting out horribly.
the
You want, Mayor, I can, or Zach, do you want to redo it?
I've got some notes on here, but if you've got it better.
Well, the motion on is that we are deferring action on the final plat until such time as the preliminary and final plan come back to the city council for action.
And was there a note on there about conferring with KDOT?
That is on the preliminary, that was on item B, is the KDOT issue. The plat, there's no need for that.
You're breaking up again.
I was just saying there's no action related to the plat that relates to KDOT, only on the preliminary and final plan. If there is some adjustments in the final plan, it could impact the plat, but it's not necessary to make that part of the motion because we're just deferring this action.
I vote yes.
And Councilmember Shriver
Yes.
and Mayor McTaggart.
Yes. Okay. Let's move on to item number 9, consider resolution 2020-17 establishing a legislative agenda for 2021.
I'm going to make this as quickly as I can, Mayor, because I know it's been a long evening, but basically each year as the city, we adopt the LKM Statement of Municipal Policy as our kind of, I'm looking for the right word now, for our legislative agenda. So the reason we do that is if items come up during this next session, it basically, this resolution gives staff authority to write a letter or supporting or opposing something that's within the LKM statement of policy. As you know, the statement of policy goes through a broad review across the state. Fundamentally, the policy is about local control, and that's their primary function. If something came up that is outside the norms or some unique bills, there's generally discussions that occur on those items and we come back to the council. But sometimes it's just something as simple as giving, support for local control on, EMS services or something of that nature. Or, there's always a lot of stuff around annexation. We don't generally comment on it because we don't have annexation as an issue for us. So it's the way we've done it for a number of years. It seems to work. You know, we never know what bills are going to get filed, but we know there'll probably be 800 or 900 of them probably filed in a given session. And as we all know, it's not a clean process, but we use this kind of as our guidepost to, you know, respond to those requests that we generally, they come from LKM. Sometimes they may come from an elected leader, but we generally refer back to the LKM policies. So that's really what it is. It's fairly straightforward. We're not an active, you know, we're not active at the State House. We don't have a, you know, separate lobbyist or person on staff such as the UG has. So they kind of go through a very separate policy statement to set up their, you know, legislative agenda. We're not that active. If something comes up that, you know, you all see that you want us to be active on, we can always do that as well. So with that, we would recommend approval of the resolution that basically adopts the LKM municipal statement of municipal policy as our legislative agenda, and basically authorize the city manager to act on our behalf on legislative issues.
Are we going to have comments on this one?
Yes. You're first.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Reaching for.
I had just a couple of items. I read through the legislative policy or agenda, and most of the things I'm really on board with as far as local control and home rule. But there were just a couple of concerns that I had with the 2021 agenda. At some point, they did add gender identity to the non-discrimination statement. And while I believe the intentions are really good and all people should be treated with respect, there are bipartisan bills that, as we speak, in the federal legislature preventing men from competing in women's sports. This also crosses into guys and girls' locker rooms and vice versa. And I don't feel like in good conscience I could support that lobbying effort. This also was the fair market of properties skyrocketing well above inflation. I believe it's time to reconsider property valuation and assessments. Just because a person's home is worth more in fair market value doesn't put more money in their pocket to hand over to the government year after year. This particular policy is proving more detrimental on those with a fixed income each year, and I think it's time our state consider less burdensome options for property valuation, and Kansans shouldn't be taxed out of their homes. I know that we as a city don't really have a lot of say in those things. I just know that as far as lobbying efforts, if we're asked to go to the state level and speak on either of those issues, I just had a couple of conflicting thoughts and ideas with them.
Could you just, for me, just if it's in there, reference the page on those two items so I'm seeing what you're seeing, if you, or what areas that is, just so I can.
I can. The one was the non-discrimination statement, and I am flipping through everything right now. And the other one was property valuation. So property valuation in our packet is on page 67. And it's on the page that says finance and taxation.
Okay, yeah.
And then, sorry, let me try to find this other for you.
Well, you're okay. So I think there's actually consensus on the issue that the formula being used for property tax assessments and values does have a lot of issues that need to be there. I think probably one of the biggest issues that's come up over the last couple of years is, and it really happens more in the corporate and industrial world, is that they can go out and we've seen the impact of this. So they go out, they hire, you know, a group of property evaluators and lawyers, et cetera, and then submit that to the Board of Tax Appeals. But yet our appraisal district or the appraisers that work for the county are not allowed to submit the same information. So it's an unequal review of the facts when it comes to some of these things. So I think there's a lot of things around that. You know, I don't know that the state's going to change that residential property is treated at, you know, so residential properties are assessed at 11.5% versus commercial properties at 25%. I'm not sure, I've not heard of anything that would change that residential property somehow would be treated at like commercial properties when it comes to the assessment of the property. So I know there's some change of saying that, you know, just how the whole process works, especially through the Board of Tax Appeals. There's a lot of people on both sides of the equation that have felt like it's not a fair system and that there needs to be a review and examination of that. So I think generally we would be in support of those things to make sure that, you know, I think as you said, that it's just not we're going to change it by some number, that there has to be some basis for which appraisals are done that are fair and not just creating an endless increase in values just because there's a, you know, we're going to increase it by a CPI or we're going to increase it by this that may have no relationship to taxation. So I think that's where generally that's been. I know there's some questions on changing the budget time frame because that's one of the problems with that, with property taxes. And as you know, we ran into that several times. We don't have accurate data, and then by the time we get it, the numbers have changed, and oftentimes then it forces us to look at a raise in a mill levy when that wasn't the intention of our governing bodies, right? So it's again kind of back to local control. And on the other item, I'm looking for it, so I'm not sure where that one's at.
Mike, that's on I'm not sure what page it's on the agenda, but it's on page 15 on this one. It's under government policies and procedures.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on page 7, the full packet. And so, and just on the other one, it wasn't so much in the commercial versus residential. I just think it's time that as the fair market values of properties keep going up and up and up, we can't keep raising tax dollars up and up and up just because the house is worth more. If that makes sense.
I understand.
Yeah, I would kind of bring a point out that Carolyn, the most important thing about this agenda really is the first page where it says legislative priorities.
Yeah.
That's where the league puts most of their focus, while they do, you know, watch out for all the rest of them in this whole document. The most important priorities are on that legislative priorities. So you start getting into the interior of it and start picking out those little things, you're not going to get anywhere. And the whole fact of it is, in my opinion, and here I've served on the LKM board for years now, I don't think there's a single legislator reads that whole document. I think they read the first page, which is legislative priorities, and they try to. But I guarantee you that the LKM lobbyists are there for everything that is to support, you know, our cities and our residents. So, but anyway, that having said that, that's all I've got. Carolyn, if you've got no more, we'll move on to Garrett.
Sorry about that. Got to turn mic on. I don't have any comments.
Okay, thank you. Margaret?
No comment.
Okay, Chuck?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. So now the chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution 2020-17 establishing a legislative agenda for 2021.
I make the motion to approve resolution 2021-17 establishing a legislative agenda for 2021, allowing the city manager to act on legislative issues.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2021. Would the clerk please call roll?
Stites,
Yes.
Cahar,
No.
MALT,
Yes.
and Shriver.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mike, advisory report, make it quick.
I will make it very quick. Just as you know, so on 110th Street project, that should be going to bid in about 7 days. So we got notice from the KDOT. Before these things bid, they always ask us to confirm that we have a certain amount of dollars set aside for the project. So we were able to do that, which looks like it may be slightly lower than the engineer's estimate, but they're very comparable. So basically what happens on those is when they award the bid, which will happen in January, then we have to put up our money into the project. And at the end of the project, which generally is about 2 years after the project is done, then they kind of true up the account and say, you know, there's plus or minus. Generally, they're fairly, you know, I mean, we're talking about a project that's $5 million. And at the end of it, you know, generally it might be $20,000 or $30,000. So they're generally pretty tight on those things. I mean, unless you just run into something that's completely unexpected. You may have noticed, and because we've had a few calls on 98th Street. So our engineers have been doing the preliminary engineering work that we had already approved before we were notified that that we're, you know, being recommended for funding. So that final decision hasn't been made by the MARC board. That I think probably happens in January or February. But as you recall, we had already retained BHC to start doing really from 98th Street from K32 all the way to the North City limits to do some more concept scopes. And so that fed right into what we're doing anyways. So we're not really losing anything out of that, but we'll use that information both for the actual project development and for, you know, using it in our street study that we've talked about bringing back at the first part of the year to say, here's some concepts and issues, because some of the things we're doing on 98th Street can be done on other streets. So conceptually, they're doing that. CARES funds, just so you know, we're fast approaching the end of the year. There may be legislation that says, oh, by the way, the 30th is not the date that you have to have everything actually spent and operational. But what likely we will do is we'll revise our plan to the UG that then goes to the state. It basically says we have sufficient expenses in public safety. We'll probably pick fire, that it still justifies us getting the money that we got, the $446,000. I think that's what it was. And as you know, a portion of that, $164,000, was to pay for expenses we had during COVID that weren't project related, but were paid for overtime, for court staffing, some of those things that we've already expended. And then I'll have hopefully an update of where we're at on all our projects, and then we'll finalize those just to make sure we don't lose the dollar. So we may move it into the general fund as a mechanism to secure those dollars, but it won't change our projects. So we're still doing all the projects we said we were going to do. We just don't want the money to have to be reimbursed back to the state because we haven't justified all of the dollars. So it's more of a paperwork issue than anything else. And then the last thing I have, since we won't meet before Christmas, number one, Merry Christmas. Number two, we'll probably have some limited staffing and hours between Christmas, which is on a Friday, and New Year's, which is on a Friday. So there's about a 4-day period in there. Partly that's just to help with, you know, COVID issues, people traveling, some people are on vacation, just to try to reduce, you know, exposure potentials because of traveling and those types of things. And part of it just because there's those 4 days in there that are fairly limited in things. So you may see some actions around that. I did get advised today that our county is getting the first doses of the vaccine. Actually, it's planned to come from Moderna versus Pfizer. Obviously, they still got to get their approval this week, but that seems to be the plan, and it will mainly be focused on emergency responders, paramedics, EMS, public health, you know, people, as far as our types of employees. So the hospitals are getting their own, but through public health department, it'll be focused there, which is what we anticipated. But so they're now making kind of plans of how many from where and et cetera and so forth. So we're working with the public health department to ensure that we're engaged in that. And they've been very, you know, having us engaged in that so we can make sure our frontline emergency responders are getting vaccinated as soon as they can. I assume the question will come up, we are not mandating vaccinations. So, but generally we're hearing from most of our employees that are in that area that they would prefer to get vaccinated, but we're not mandating it at this point. So that's my report. I'll try to make it as quick as possible, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike. Zach, have you got any comments?
Just real quick, just to remind everybody, we do have the pancake feed, the drive-through pancake feed, as well as the Ho-Ho Express parade going on this Saturday, December 19th. So the pancake feed will be, we'll post kind of routes and all that online here in the next day or so. Pancake feed will actually be in front of City Hall, allow people to go one in, one out. That's an easier traffic pattern to maintain than over at the community center. That starts at 8 a.m. Around 10 o'clock that morning, the fire department and the EMS and our parks folks that are working will bring the breakfast over to the senior care facilities. All we're asking, it's a free event. We are asking people to donate items that will eventually go back to the senior care facilities, those being things like winter clothing, socks, old magazines, puzzle books, things like that, just that they like to have around so they can use. At 1 o'clock, the Ho-Ho Express will start. We have got stops scheduled at 9th and Blake, 3rd and Beach, the River Falls subdivision, 105th Terrace and Shelton entryway into Williamson Farms, Barber Avenue and South 104th Terrace, Edgehill Drive, and Rock Ridge. So trying to hit all the major established neighborhoods for those stops. We'll get kind of a preliminary, we've got a route that we'll be releasing soon, and then we'll attach some just general times where we think we're going to be in those areas. The parade will stop for about 10 to 15 minutes in those areas and hand out some goodies that staff will be putting together this week. I do want to recognize our sponsors for the Cram the Cruiser, Cram the Fire Truck event. All of these sponsors that are shown on the screen have donated or have committed to a $500 donation that would go towards Edwardsville families in need. Those families are supplied to the city through the elementary school. They've got kind of a vetting and identification process that they fill us in on. So with all these sponsors, we're able to sponsor, I want to say 8 families with over the holidays with groceries and winter clothing and kind of a Christmas item as well to give them. So I do want to give a shout out to all these groups. A lot of them are familiar names who have supported us in the past, and I am appreciative of their continued support of our programming. And that is all I have at this time.
Thank you, Zach. Chief Mathis?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. Just very quickly, property crimes, or if you didn't know, some of the toughest crimes to solve. And as you do know, we had a series of felony property thefts involving thefts of cars, pickup trucks, trailers, that sort of thing, and various property. We totaled May to that late November, probably about 24 incidents. In those, we've made 9 arrests and recovered a lot of the property. We have a number of them pending charges with the district attorney's office, and we have a significant amount of evidence at the KBI lab being evaluated, and thus will lead to more charges. In addition to that, we had the shooting up north there. We made 2 arrests already in that, and we keep on kicking. Our detectives have logged about 116 hours just in those property crime investigations. So been pretty busy, but very productive, very positive work in that area. So just want to let you know that you have an update on that, because I presume our year-end reports won't come till somewhat about springtime. So that's what I have. Merry Christmas to everybody. Thanks for support in 2020.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Whittam.
Yes, good evening. Again, to start off, Merry Christmas to everybody, since the city will be pretty much running around here shut down starting next Thursday and Friday. To follow up on what Zach has for Saturday, we will probably start cooking at the City Hall parking lot somewhere around 7 a.m. It'll be a long day. I know I have talked to Santa personally again today. We have everything set up for hopefully a good turnout on Saturday as well. Finally, with that, we had a couple sponsors for the actual pancake purchases for the food supplies for Saturday. One being a uniform distributor, Jay's Uniforms, and the other one being the Firefighters Union. But we have everything lined up, and hopefully, as long as the weather holds out, Saturday will be a good day.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Public Works, Dustin.
We're not hearing you, Dusty.
Yeah, I see your light on, but we don't hear you. Okay, I think we have lost connection, or he has. So let's move on to Lisa. Do you have any?
I'm not sure if Lisa is, I mean, I know she can hear, but she was having difficulties talking unless she's on now.
Okay.
Mayor, I might just add on behalf of Lisa, this goes way back, but the property that we had through that we have through the old Raintree project. So all of that is kind of getting wrapped up on the legal side, and effectively as of the end of this month, we will officially basically be off the property. For the most part, we already are, but so it's moving forward through all of its requirements, and so we should have all that wrapped up. So I did get both a text from Lisa saying she didn't have anything additional, and I see Dusty put in the chat that he didn't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So we'll move on to the council. I'm going to go by the order that I was recognizing. So we'll go by alphabetical. So Carolyn, you're first.
In the comments, one of the fellows was concerned about the streets, and I just wanted to remind everybody that we can't respond during public comments, that's not the time, but if you hang on till the end, then we'll try to get around to it, and a lot of times our city managers will answer questions and things like that at the end. I just wanted to mention that since joining the council, I have been a big advocate for street repairs. Our streets have continued to be in disrepair, which is why a few months ago we started that street repair plan that Dusty and Mike have been working on together. to address both small and large streets that need repaired in the city. And then also that SDP grant on 98th Street that we heard about tonight. Hopefully we'll be getting some funding for that soon. But Mike, I was wondering on that, could we hear in January an update on the streets plan on what new projects are coming up for repairs in the next quarter?
That is the plan, is to try to bring that back. We may not have it all done as far as a formal kind of document, but give you an update on that report and where we're at and what we're thinking. I know Dustin has been working on looking at some plans from everything from just general seal coats to chip seals to, you know, those kind of pavement, what I would call really more pavement preservation pieces than necessarily the big projects that are, you know, reconstruction pieces. So I know he's a long ways on that and has kind of been mapping out the city and getting that ready to go. So I feel fairly certain we'll be able to make a report at one of the 2 meetings in January on the street report and where we're at.
Perfect. And then did I understand the CARES Act funding, if we move that into the general fund, and if we can justify all the costs to fire, we'll still be able to use the money for the specific projects later on?
Correct, yeah. So one of the way the CARES was set up was that all public safety expenses, so cities are treated a little bit different than the nonprofits and others or governmental entities. And basically, we got an allocation based on population, as you know. And so we just have to be able to justify that those dollars that we got, that there's a justification for those total dollars. How we ultimately use them is really more of a local decision. But the way the system's set up under CARES is any CARES project. So when we submitted, we said there's certain things here and there's certain things that are projects. If it's a specific project and we're going to use CARES dollars under that kind of concept, that project has to be complete, generally complete and operational by the end of the year. So we know some of those just aren't. Some things we bought are easy, and other things, I mean, even the stuff in the council room with the laptops and things, they're on order, but we don't know when we're going to get them. You know, some of the other improvements in there are going to get done literally, I think, December 29th or something. I mean, you know, or 24th. I mean, so we're kind of pushing the time frame, and what we don't want to do is lose any of the dollars that were allocated to us. So we will take the steps to ensure the dollars are protected and the projects can still go forward as we'd already outlined them. So that's what we're doing.
And I wanted to ask you also just on an update on community service, the court-appointed community service, and if we have a procedure for that yet. So if anyone has been assigned community service, but then once they get assigned, what happens? Do they come on a Saturday? Who do they report to? Who are they working with for that? Could you just explain that for me?
Sure. So anybody that's appointed by the court, the general process is they have to complete some forms that basically relieves them of liabilities, etc. They contact the community service officer, who is in connection with Public Works and others on particular, if there's a particular project, you know, trash pickup in a certain area, or if it was, maybe we're doing something in parks or something like that. And then they're assigned to a place and a time to do their work. We provide them, you know, basic safety gear. Now we're not standing over them, you know, for however many hours that they have to work off. But they are assigned in that. I will say, you know, we've just had the first couple, and I think there's some things we need to tighten up on that, just to make sure that we're making sure the expectations are clear to that person or persons, and that we have a way to measure that. And so it's just a little bit of a learning curve. So I want to try to get with the judge here and just find out a little bit more about what we can do to try to encourage more of this, whether it's voluntary or whether it's sentenced. I mean, there's a little more concern about sentencing people versus voluntary, but I'm going to get with him and see what we can do to help support that. And if it's something we can do from a legislative standpoint, a policy standpoint, I know he's expressed he thought that the exchange amount that we use $12 per hour exchange amount, that probably needs to be increased to $15 an hour as an exchange amount. So we don't pay the person, but it's if they do an hour of community service, how much do they get to take off of their fine, right? And so he may have a point with that. So we definitely need to.
I agree with that to an extent, except for I guess when you're saying they're under someone, but they're not supervised by anyone, so there's no one like with them or making sure they're actually doing the work. It seems to me like if we have somebody who is over the maintaining the public spaces, we were talking about hiring somebody on public works that would take care of the cemetery, but also take care of our public spaces. That would be a great opportunity for them to work alongside the person for a few hours on a Saturday, cleaning up or doing whatever we have going on in the community. And that might be, I don't know, it seems like you get more done with a few people than one person, and we might have concerns with just dropping them off and letting them go.
Well, and I think, you were mainly dealing with adults, but there's times, I think there's times when we could just put them with our crew and say, okay, you're here on Friday and we're going to put you with the public works crew, and they're going to be out mowing grass and weed eating and, cleaning up an area or cutting trees or picking up brush or whatever, where they're more managed. And there's other times where you may have somebody, you can put them in an area to pick up trash and, check on them. I don't know if it's a good use of our resources to have somebody stand there and watch them, but we also need to make sure that we're getting the product that we're getting from them equal to what they're getting from us, right? Because I can go hire a person for $15 an hour and have them pick up trash and don't
right. Well, and I wouldn't suggest having him
make
stand
sure
there and watch him. I wouldn't suggest having him stand there and watch him, but like some of the other agencies do with their community policing, community service, they get out there and they work alongside him. So if they're picking up trash that day, the supervisor and whoever's there for community service, and that way we should never pay anyone just to stand there. That wouldn't make sense at all. So I was just kind of wondering how that was coming along. I know litter's been an ongoing issue, and it's kind of one of my little pet peeves is to have litter, and I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything I haven't done personally myself, and walking in and picking stuff up. So I was just kind of wondering how that's coming along. If you'd keep us posted and how that's progressing, that would be great. Let's see, last thing I have is our next Harvesters event coming up will be in 2021. We are hoping for January 9th, the second Saturday, and it'll be another pre-registration event. So I'm working on getting registration for people to let us know to be expecting them and have groceries there for them. Last time we had a few people on the council, Margaret and Garrett both came that Saturday, which was awesome. But if anybody on the council or in the city, also we had police department and the fire department came out and helped, which was fantastic. We had great support. So if anybody wants to come out that day, that would be awesome.
Okay, thank you. Garrett?
I got about an hour's worth of stuff to say here.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to thank Dave. Am I on? I'd like to thank Dave Knoppy I'd like to thank Dave for all the work that he's done for us. And I know it's a challenge a lot of times. We're going to miss your face around here, but I'll have to find the new guy and show him show him what I'm all about. So anyway, thank you, Dave, for everything. The other thing is I couldn't go without commenting on Mike's backdrop. Isn't it kind of cold out there tonight in front of the store with the,
Well,
anyway.
you know, it's a little chilly, but this is the award-winning photograph from our contest that will be a part of our 2021 budget cover. So I wanted to make sure to honor that.
I recognize that building pretty well, and one of the guys in the audience tonight, is Philip Sloop, has got a lot of history with that building. And if you do the 110th Street gang on Facebook, he had a pretty good narrative and commentary about the history of that building. So I want to recognize that. If anybody wondered who Philip Sloop is, he was an old local boy that I grew up with here. So anyway, I had to comment on that. The other thing is I wanted to welcome Bradley Holziver, I guess, coming in to take a seat that's was previously filled by Dave, and wish him a lot of luck, and I'll probably be around there sometime to meet him. And the very last thing that I've got is I want to say Merry Christmas, and I want to say Happier New Year. And that's what I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Margaret?
Thank you, Mayor. Usually when it gets to the second, third, fourth person, everybody's said things or talked about stuff. I do want to touch on the streets and roads like Carolyn had mentioned. You do see the feedback from a lot of the community, a lot of the citizens about the roads. And it may be on a lot of roads I don't particularly drive on, some of us don't drive on, but when the concerns are rolling in and talks about the roads, I hope the community does know that, yes, we do have a plan in place. But I wondered, I know, Mike, Edwardsville either rented or borrowed a truck or equipment to do some patching, a year or two ago. I don't know if that's an option. I know the Public Works isn't cutting much grass, hopefully not any grass, but hopefully if maybe we could borrow the equipment or even pay a company to come do some patchwork. I know the patchwork isn't the fix, but at least it helps until we can get to the roads, because there are a lot of roads that need attention, whether it be just some patchwork, whether it be a small seal or just a whole new improvement. But maybe we could look into something like that. I'd like to thank Dave too. Dave, you've been just a super person to work with, so knowledgeable. You explain things so well. It has been a pleasure working with you. And Carolyn, thank you for organizing these harvesters events, and they are tremendous for the people that need this, and it is tremendous being able to help and volunteer at these events. And I do want to thank Mike Martin, was there helping too, so I didn't want him to feel slighted. I know there was a ton of volunteers, but he being a employee of the city too, I forgot he was there, but you know, just a shout out to him as well. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Everybody stay safe and just have a great rest of the year. And I'm excited for our first meeting in January at 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Chuck?
Okay. Yeah, I too. So in the very beginning of tonight's meeting, we were having some difficulties. I was having difficulties, let me put it that way, getting logged on. And I know that there was, I caught just a little bit of a letter or something that was being read, and I caught the name Dan. If I could get that, the name of that person, you can send it to me into my email or whatever, but I think I was just barely catching some of it. But I think the gist of it was concerns about the roads, excuse me, the roads repairs and such in our city. And I will tell you, if that was the gist of the conversation, I would highly encourage, I would like to see that folks, our emails are out there for people to send us emails, and I respond back to people that send. I'm not a Facebook watcher, but if you send me an email, you'll get my phone number and I will call back. As Carolyn had mentioned earlier on, I too have been one that has really stayed on top of road repairs. You guys have heard me so many times talk about chip and seal, whether it's mill and replace, and how we go about that. And I was glad to hear that, Zach, that you said that these folks are getting some feedback on their questions, because I think if they come to us, I think it is so important that we respond back and give them, which I know we are, that we respond back and we give them, not always, we can't always give them the exact answer that they want, but I think it's important that they at least know what our direction is. And you guys have heard me say about other projects that I want to hold off on things being done until our roads in this city get to where you don't tear up a vehicle going down the roads. So I am in full support of making sure the people that live in our city are driving around here, paying the taxes, the high taxes, and that they have safe and quality roads to drive on. And I'll get off that, but I encourage anybody to email me if they have any more comments about that I can help with. I thought we had some really good dialogue tonight on the planning and zoning and the things that was going on. I thought that was great, and how we got to work through that. Concerning about the uptick in property crimes in the North End, well, I would be concerned about it if it was anywhere in our city, but I know that our police department's out there and on it. I've seen them, I've talked to them, and I'd like to hopefully with the new information that comes back that we get some more arrests and people get put in jail over this. Nobody likes that. The hardships that are coming along with COVID and being home and some out of work. It's a shame that people are out there stealing from them. That's all I've got to say. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate all the input tonight, and I want to close out with a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all, and see you next year. Thank you. We are adjourned.